All right, we are live.
I need like a countdown from you, David, like into the like three, two, one.
Five,
Do we need to
four.
get a Colasec clapper? What?
It's just him in the background being a asshole, just like
I'm not going to be able to differentiate that from the rest of the meeting.
mm-mm.
Right, right.
How's our audio?
I don't hear anything, but oh, there we go. All right. Yep. So I'm getting the countdown for myself now. We're that far behind. So we got like the 7-second delay in case someone swears.
Yeah, YouTube is a little delayed. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not gonna bleep
No,
it.
that's fine. No, that's fine.
But yeah, take it away, Tim.
All right. So welcome to October Colasec. Who are we? If you don't know already, I'm sorry, but you're in
How
for
the hell
pain.
did you get here?
Yeah, exactly. No, please tell us how you got here so we can get more
Seriously,
people
you got to plug the leak.
here.
Tell us which one of our 3 social media platforms is actually working, because we're not using
them. So we have co-founder Adam Twitty, who is not massless, but he's eating a cookie. Jessica Butel, who is a doctor and not here because she's doing doctor things. Myself, Tim D. Block. We've got Jeff Lang
Hello.
at the bottom as a co-organizer. David Girl behind the tank.
Howdy.
And then
I think he's actually in front of the tank.
Yes,
Oh,
the tank is behind
well,
me.
It depends, I guess, on your viewpoint. It could whatever. No, well
Tim's
played.
actually hiding behind that tank right now.
Yeah. See the big tank over there? Yeah, David's on
It's
the
all
other side.
perspective.
Yeah. I don't, what is a tank for? Like, why that picture? Out of all your pictures.
You know how we work. Someone put that there. I didn't put that there.
So all these were found online.
That was to promote Alzheimer's writing, but it wasn't intended for Colasec, but it ended up here anyway.
Yeah, here we are.
That was at the Armory.
That's at
Or was
Fort,
that on
Fort Jackson. Yeah, that's at like their parade grounds or whatever. They've got that, and
Yep.
then another like, I don't know, people carrying tank, whatever you call those.
APCs.
Sure.
People carrying tanks.
It's like I only know them from like the 40s, the like boxy kind of, the ones that have a door in the back, and there's like a couple guys inside. There's someone on like a gun, but it's like small windows. There's not a big missile launching machine thing on the front.
Yeah, it's a armored personnel carrier.
Yeah.
All right, and then we got the director, Mr. Corey Grant.
Moving along.
Who just left the meeting.
I don't. He had enough of this.
To be fair, Corey has baby things to deal with, so.
And refinance. I think he's refinancing his house.
Yeah, well, join the club.
Yeah.
Did ours earlier this year.
Yeah. When your property value goes up for no explicable reason, no reason not to take advantage of it.
Yeah. All right. So getting connected. As David mentioned, we're on all sorts of social media. So please tell us which one you engage with the most. We have Slack, email list, Twitter, website. You can email us info@colasec.org. We're on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube. All the things. Did y'all hear that?
What was that?
That was my wife burping.
I was gonna blame it on your son, but that's even better.
She's giggling downstairs. I don't know if she realizes that we record these.
That it's on the internet.
It's on the internet now.
The burp heard round the world.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I know, I love it because she's so shy too. If you guys know her. So share a brew with the crew. If you jump into Slack, you can certainly drop in the beer channel, post a pic of your beer. Yeah, Adam shares here. I got a little grip it and rip it. Little
I have some elbow patches going on.
elbow patches.
I'm losing cookie. It's unacceptable.
And Adam just dropped his cookie. So besides Augusta was recently, so we're going to talk about that briefly. So actually, I hope more people would be here that actually attended, but apparently they're not here. Rick, I think you were there, weren't you? Was I mistaken? Was I dreaming?
I'll poke Mac and Eyes to find out why he's not here.
Yeah. So it was a good event. It was nice to get back into kind of the swing of things with conferences. I usually go to like 8 to 10 a year, so it was nice. One of the cool things they had this year was like one of these badges that mine was pre-built, put together because I spoke at the conference. But you could actually put this all together and learn how to solder, which is an interesting skill set, and I would think fairly useful for people wanting to get into electronics. What's cool about this too is I was wearing an ILF shirt. And someone from the Blue Team Village, one of the organizers from the Blue Team Village out in Vegas, was at the conference as well. And she recognized my shirt and gave me some swag based on it because she's a volunteer at ILF too. But apparently people were carrying around swappable things that you could add to your badge. So I was walking around with like a Blue Team Village badge, which was really cool and unique. So I was very thankful for her to give me that. Good event. I like it because it's very defender focused, so it's more blue team type of stuff than it is red team type of stuff. You'll get a lot of military people around there. One of my favorite conversations I like to tell people is I went to the Augusta ISSA chapter meeting one time, and I was talking to one of the organizers, and I was like, "So who all's here?" He's like, "Well, that person's NSA, that's CIA." Cyber Command. I'm like, oh, holy crap! I better watch what I say here, huh? Or what network I connect to. But yeah, you can see there some stickers. Josh was there. Josh Huff. You can see kind of some of the stuff that we got there. And great talks. Really nice to have some hallway con again and like talk to people in the industry and catch up with people that I really haven't seen in like 2 years. They only had about 500 attendees, so. Usually they get about 1,200, so they really did cap to kind of still deal with some of the COVID stuff going on. So, fun event. Highly recommend it if you're into going to conferences, or if you're in the Columbia area, it's an hour drive. So it's really accessible for a lot of stuff, and the cost of it is super cheap. You get some really great value out of what you pay for. And usually if you guys come with us, we'll have, a cola set crew going, which we did. We had Sonny, we had Mackenzie, like I said, Josh Huff, I drove down, and then Jeff, who just joined. I'm glad Jeff just joined. And I'm totally going to call him out right now. But Jeff was a volunteer there, which is always great. It's always a great way to meet people at conferences. Jeff, yeah, there it is. See, Jeff's got his badge.
Nice.
Jeff, did you want to talk about your experience at the conference? Like what you thought? Was that your first time there?
Yeah, I got to be a bouncer and make sure that no little hoodlums tried to sneak into talks that they didn't pay for. And it was an invigorating experience.
Yeah, and what he means by that is he sat on a chair right next to one of the doors. I kept walking by going, "You're doing a great job, Jeff. Great job."
When you volunteer, I'm actually wearing the shirt today too. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
When you volunteer, you make yourself a servant of whatever they need.
Yep. No, I highly recommend volunteering at conferences, especially like B-sides, which are most entirely run on volunteers. So they really need people like Jeff and anybody else that's willing to come in and speak. And, I used to do a lot of photography for a lot of these different conferences to, bring some value, but meet some people, and you really get to know some people there. Did you like the conference over? Did you get to, I think, Jeff showed up to, I think, my talk and maybe one other, and then he had to go do his bouncing.
Yeah, that was good. Interested in getting into more conferences as they start kicking up again, and especially things I don't have to fly through quite yet.
Yeah. And there's a B-sides within throwing distance of about everybody, so you can usually find one. They're in Nashville, might be next year. It depends on, some of these may have not survived the pandemic, but I think Greenville's usually, no, they're not March.
Greenville was virtual this year, but they're February, March timeline usually.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Is Charlotte still rolling? They were doing fits and starts.
I checked their website and couldn't find anything a couple months ago, but I haven't looked recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they'll start spinning up again next year. So
Looking forward to getting back out there.
yep, because B-Sides Augusta was being held when the event actually occurred. We were on the other side of the Delta variant curve, but prior to the conference, like a few weeks before, I was wondering if they were going to cancel, and they ended up going through with it. So I think there's going to be more conferences like that are willing to do in person.
Yeah.
So, and no reported cases of COVID because of it, at least that I know of. I don't know.
By the way, who turned on the bat signal?
What bag? Where?
Well, we doubled the number of people on the meeting in the last 15 minutes.
Yeah. If you present it, they will come.
They heard Tim
That's
was
the spirit.
talking. They didn't want to miss the news.
Oh. The news. We've
The
also got a new
news.
segment tonight. That should be fun. We did it at our V Pub, which turned into some fun. So this was interesting. 106 Italian mafia members were arrested for online crimes. They were doing swim swapping.
Swim swapping?
Sim swapping.
Ooh, swim swap.
Swim
Don't
swapping.
Google that.
They were swapping pools.
That synchronized swimming is just a dangerous, dangerous crime. Gotta put a stop to it.
So, now can you imagine mafia members doing synchronized swimming? Thank you for that visual. They were using so sim swapping is when essentially you call up your telephone provider, someone's telephone provider, and get them to swap out the sim, so they can then pretty much take over your phone for a variety of malicious crimes.
Take your crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, crypto's a big thing right now. Baseball sponsored by some crypto exchange that talks about going to the moon and all this fun stuff. So they use tactics like phishing. Their targets included companies. They would also do BEC attacks. They stole $11.7 million. Most were in Italy, but they were also in Ireland, Spain, Germany, Lithuania, and UK. So if you think it's just like little punk computer hackers with like hoodies, it's actually, they're seeing the profitability of this stuff, right? And they're going to get into it and get technologically savvy enough to be able to perform some of these attacks. A lot of these are simple, right?
I'm sort of the belief that all 95% of the malware floating around, the phishing campaigns and all that's just organized crime. It's crews operating that are technically savvy at what they do, and they've gotten good at it, so they do a lot of it because the more of it they do, the more profitable it is.
Well, we've talked
until someone comes and gives them the silver bracelets.
Right. Well, and we've talked about that too, right? Is ransomware at this point is its own business with multiple different pieces, right? They have their own supply chain stuff.
I want to see a market analysis that shows the market share of ransomware crews and like what percentage of the economy that is. Anyway.
Yep. No, it's interesting stuff. But that's why I like calling out this stuff is that it's interesting. And know who your threat actors are.
Talk about ransomware driving economy. There's now businesses that are popping up just to help you get through ransomware. So there's, we make ransomware simulation tools. We do your negotiation for you. We insure you. There's several different types of companies that make money off ransomware in a legitimate fashion.
Yeah,
that's true. Long live ransomware.
I wonder who's double dipping.
Oh,
running the ransomware campaign and
someone has to be, right?
That's called racketeering.
Right?
I've thought about it before. It's come up in conversation a couple times. I'll admit.
Nice.
Yep.
The old mafia protection racket in cyberspace. Fantastic.
So coming soon, Microsoft to let users go passwordless. This will be on consumer accounts, so people in IT that have to deal with an enterprise, don't freak out just yet. Alternative options will be security keys, SMS codes, Windows Hello biometrics, and then Microsoft Auth, the mobile app, will be their options, which to me might actually be more secure for a lot of these for consumers on passwords, right? It's almost flipping it for something you know to something you have.
Well,
Which
you
is your
never
phone.
had to know. You never had to know your password.
Right. You just had to have it on hand.
Well, you there's so many options for forgetting it that you didn't have to know it to begin with.
Yeah,
That's fair.
I think I think it's a good thing because I think they're gonna like if most modern computers have TPMs, right? So they should be able to just use your TPM to authenticate you with a PIN instead of all this other nonsense. Just trying to remember passwords.
I mean, at the end of the day, if we can get to a point where you've got PIN plus TPM on a device that you recognize, plus a little bit of biometrics, you literally got all three. You can't get any better than that.
Right.
I can't authenticate you with more information.
Yeah.
Are we gonna daisy chain? Yeah. Like you can't go deviceless all at one time. You have to at least daisy chain one device through.
I'm sure that'll be some of the fun edge cases where, so I fell off of a boat and cooked my phone and my smartwatch and my authentication token and
My hand got cut off in the tank.
We'll ship you a DNA sample kit to ensure that you are
Right,
who
to
you say
verify
you
that
are.
and only there's a time of 30 days required.
That's the cyberpunk future I want to live in, where you got to plug in a little USB thing and then lick it to authenticate.
Oh, lick authentication.
23andMe is going to make all kinds of money selling your DNA.
Oh, God.
Can you do flavor auth at that point? Like a butterscotch flavored?
Yes, I need the butterscotch authenticator.
Or just full vape. You just breathe butterscotch vape into a sensor.
Oh my! I am looking forward. So one of the there's two things in this auth space that I'm really excited about. One is the new NIST guidance to stop changing your damn passwords and just make it a long one and only change it when you need to.
You mean from
i.e.
5 years ago? That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I know, but look, we're starting to adopt things now.
Okay.
The industry's finally getting around to looking at the new authentic or the new standards. But this push by Microsoft to go passwordless is exciting to me. The next decade, I'll finally be able to stop recycling passwords every 15 days, and I'll be a happier man.
Yeah, so 20 years from now, you won't have a password, and maybe you also will be driving an electric car. Who knows?
I will point out, by the way, that by then I will be eyeballing retirement.
There you go.
So
looking at buying that sweet flying car and getting a ride into space on Jeff Bezos' balloon.
Oh, please. I actually want to go somewhere useful. I'll be on a SpaceX rocket. Thank you.
I just realized we really should have like a note taker for all of our great ideas that we have. Is there anybody I could talk into starting to take notes on?
We need a Colasec clerk.
Yeah,
Would you like to volunteer for that punishment?
We need we need someone to write down lick off. Talking about passwordless.
Officer position.
Yeah.
No, this
we'll list
sounds
you as
like
an organizer. We'll list you as an organizer and then abuse you mercilessly.
This sounds like one of those ideas that people have when they're drunk or high, and they come up with like the best song ever, bro.
That's
and
3/4 of Colasec is the best idea I've ever had while drunk or high.
Yeah, but it's for security.
Not to rain on your parade, but apparently Pin Drop already has a idea for a tongue licking your phone is the best way to protect your identity.
Oh my gosh. This is fantastic.
They just wanted to troll everyone and watch everyone licking their
No, so
phones.
we're not that far off base. That's what I'm hearing. I am hearing that we're just not that far off base.
So we're on the right track. Yeah,
we're not totally crazy.
Well,
All right, next slide. We
All
need
right.
to
Well,
move
no,
it
I actually have a couple points, just some facts, right? Reasoning behind Microsoft doing this. They're seeing 589 password attacks every second, and that's 18 billion every year. So that's why they're like, screw it, we're gonna go passwordless on this. So there's a Microsoft Exchange flaw that was recently discovered.
Did somebody just fall into a wood chipper? Jesus.
I hope.
No, that is the garage door opening.
Okay.
He's okay.
I am okay.
Damn.
I think you'd hear some sort of squishy sound.
Yeah.
You probably hear some screaming.
Yeah.
Definitely screaming.
Speaking of screaming, Microsoft Exchange. So there's another flaw that they've discovered, and this is an interesting one. Is that this goes along with some of that other stuff of companies grabbing and using domains that they don't actually own, or using at this level, they're using auto discovery protocol, and it allows email clients to automatically discover email servers, provide credentials, and then they receive proper configuration, which means you can use it as a domain and have people's Microsoft email Exchange servers connect to you, because it's making a call out to some sort of discovery, right? So in this case, autodiscovery.example, you replace it with whatever domain you want to do, and then it'll connect in. And the biggest thing is it provides credentials, right? It'll provide credentials to as it tries to like authenticate and look for that configuration. So here's some examples of auto discovery domains that you can currently grab. Actually, I think this was the one that he grabbed. This is the one from the study. He ran a honeypot for 4 months, and he got 4 months. He got 372,072 Windows domain credentials, 671,000 unique creds. This was for companies in food manufacturing, investment banks, power plants, power delivery, real estate, shipping and logistics, fashion and jewelry, and publicly traded companies in the Chinese market.
Hey, there's a mistake in that list.
What?
.co is not Columbia; it's Colombia. Should be
Hey,
two
we're
O's.
growing. We're growing.
Colombia.
Yeah, but they've already beat us to that.
Here's Microsoft's
We
response.
also don't grow nearly as much as they grow there.
Nope. So this is Microsoft's response. We are actively investigating. We'll take appropriate steps to protect customers. We are committed to coordinated vulnerability disclosure and industry standard collaborative approach that reduces unnecessary risk for customers before issues are made. Unfortunately, the issue was not reported to us before the researcher marketing team presented it to the media, so we learned of the claims today. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
The sad part is those auto discover things aren't new. They've been around for a long time. You can exploit that within an organization. If you get into an organization, you can actually create those and use those. And so they just haven't really done a great job investigating around those.
It's one of the, and I forget the name of the guide, but it's either a hardening guide or a secure configuration guide for Exchange, talks you through going and registering those domains so that's off limits. It's already taken. Anyway.
Yep. No, and I think there's more of this kind of like design stuff that was made, 10 decades ago that we're gonna discover that'd be like crap.
Well, I mean, it's all stuff to make it easy, right? Like this is the stuff that makes your phone magically connect to Exchange when you key in your email address.
And you can also use it because we've seen it done in a blue team sort of way. So basically, your users will pull whatever that configuration is, and you put white and black lists into that configuration for your browser, and you can actually block and allow sites based on that. So there's a lot of things you can do with it that are kind of interesting and neat. But
all that complexity is attack surface. So here we reap what they have sown.
Yeah.
It reminds
by
me
the
of
way-
the GitHub vulnerability where there was a somehow they could register. I forget the details. They could register like a name of a product or something, or a sub dependency, and then it would pull it automatically and or versioning. I was
Yeah,
like,
that's
The typo squatting.
yeah.
Yep.
It's in the same family.
Yeah, I'd say that's is that on the OS top 10? I don't know what I don't know if typo squatting or what you would call that, but
I don't know if it's made it to the list yet, but it's certainly a thing. It's a hell of a lot more prevalent than it was, I don't know, 5 years ago.
we run a DNS type firewall, and one of the biggest ones that we have to, and we ended up putting a disclaimer on our landing page that says if you went to vt.eu instead of vt.edu, you've gone to the wrong site.
Yeah.
Because we got so many requests to like allow that, and it's like, no, that's a parking.
yeah. By the way, I do want to call out and thank Will Harvey for making a comment, which he then retracted. I did see the comment, but I won't repeat it here. I appreciate the engagement. I also love that we have suddenly gone to a retracted comment as our first comment on YouTube. I don't know if we've had other ones, but the first one I saw. Retracted is appropriate. I just love this troll, by the way. That's why I grabbed it and put it out there. But Facebook was down for a day.
The world was a better place.
The world was a
You
better
can be a dick.
place. There is a lot floating around on this. There was a faulty configuration change, but they were down for 6 hours. This was Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, right? Go ahead. Adam.
It was basically all of Facebook's owned properties.
Mm-hmm. And even by the way, their badge system, which was tied in to everything.
I knew you were
for
going
their
to
building.
I needed it mentioned.
For their building, which just makes me go, did no one do any kind of disaster recovery or business continuity plan that called this out as a possibility? This is going to be added to everybody's, disaster
For the
recovery
handful
plan,
of
by the way.
engineers that were there on that day, I'm almost sorry, but you work for Facebook, so I'm not.
Oh no.
So that sort of edge case where you put in a configuration change that brings down some sort of core system that then shuts down all of the other shit that depends on it, that's a real thing that can bite you in the ass. We did a core switch reboot one day that the firmware we put on it didn't work and couldn't get to anything, and then realized after that we had switched all of the Blade servers that were running all of our servers over to domain off, and they couldn't talk to the domain controllers because the core switch was down. So we suddenly couldn't get into, damn it. That was an interesting 45 minutes of my professional life that I don't want to relive. This
is the XKCD comment about the sysadmin where there's been a hostage takeover, and they're like, he's trying to get in through the air ducts. Like they essentially had to get their pen testers that were like doing physical assessment be like, can you break into this building for us? Just so we can get to our servers and or plug in to the core and actually change.
And they're like, sure, let's get on email and draw up that little get out of jail free letter for me. Like, yeah, we can't do that.
Yeah. It was an issue with DNS. Essentially, someone wiped out all their DNS records or networking configuration things.
It was not DNS. It was BGP.
BGP. No. That's right. Yes. Thank you for the correction, Jeff. That was again. I pulled the article from very early on.
It is DNS, but not this time.
Yeah. Nothing. nothing worked except for email and calendars internally. So if you were in the building, your email and calendars would work.
Because those are through Google.
Those were the only things not connected to Facebook. God. So if you think it's bad that the rest of the world is being monitored by Zuck, imagine his internal employees. Just about every.
Hey, it sounds like you can send email and no one will catch it.
Yeah, wow, that goes through a different system.
Right.
So the tinfoil hat theory is that this was caused primarily and done purposefully because of the whistleblower allegations against them that have been in the Wall Street Journal about how Facebook has like targeted towards kids, and there's a lot of documents that have been released from a Facebook insider that was making news headlines, and this was kind of a response to try and draw some of that attention away. And really, it may have worked at this point. So I don't know if anybody else really wants to dig into that, but interesting little thing to call out. In other news, on that day, productivity jumped.
Shocker.
Yep. That was a Monday too, wasn't it? I think that was a Monday.
It was a Monday. The Facebook whistleblower was on 60 Minutes, I think, the evening before.
The Sunday night before. Yeah. So I think
people are.
Yeah. In the other news, Twitch, which is good choice, David and team, in switching from Twitch to YouTube. Not that it really mattered for us, because I don't think we were like that big.
In the other end of screwing up everything you do.
Yeah. Their source code and business data were leaked. It got leaked on 4chan. The person doing this said it was due to the hate raids, which was bots attacking, posting hateful and abusive chat in Twitch streams. And apparently this plagued streamers over the summer. I had no idea. I'm not a big Twitch watcher. They apparently got into 6,000 internal repositories, which is a lot of repositories. And that amounted to about 125 gigabytes worth of data.
Jesus.
Wow.
Yeah. Here's what, and this is all coming from the record, by the way. I just sourced the record at this point for a lot of our news stories. But here's what the record found. Entirety of Twitch TV with commit history going back to early beginnings. Mobile, desktop, and video game console Twitch clients. Various proprietary SDKs and internal AWS services used by Twitch. Every other property that Twitch owns, including IGDB and CurseForge, an unreleased Steam competitor from Amazon Game Studios. Twitch SOC internal red teaming tools. I think my boss was like, we need to go download those immediately. You can always use more tools. And creator payout reports from 2019 till now, and find out how much your favorites. And there's some of that fallout happening now, where they're kind of calling out some of the streamers. Again, I don't care. That's the biggest
deal to me.
Yeah, I don't really like. Why is that a big deal?
Yeah, it's just posting a bunch of folks' salaries that didn't. I mean, I wouldn't want mine just posted on the internet.
Yeah.
It's kind of shitty.
You used to have that when you worked for
a state worker.
Right. I used to be.
Right. That's hooray.
Yeah, but state workers are not making nearly as much as these Twitch streamers. Goodness.
Yeah, that was some of the kerfuffle.
That's the important part.
Some of the streamers were making significant coin.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if you're entertaining, I mean that's the business, right? Is you want to be on Twitch and make some money? You better start. Like I've talked to some people, or I've played video games with people who have been on Twitch, and we're trying to get to like just 50 people watching, and then at that point you go to like the next tier, and then I'm sure there's another tier, and then at some level you get a lot of Twitch support backing on stuff, right? Because that's how their platform is run, right? Is people streaming content on there. I don't know if anybody remembers Jason TV, but that was a thing at one point. David, you're young and you're
Nope.
cute, so yep. You need to look up Jason TV and see if we can get on that platform.
Let me
Adam, I'm
Google
gonna let
that.
you take this story as our skateboarding dog story. Do you need the notes or do you have them?
Oh no, I've got this story committed to memory because
That's sad.
the Missouri state governor has outed himself as a moron and an asshole. So a couple of months ago, I may have the timeline wrong on this. Correct me, Tim. A couple of months ago, a journalist discovered that a website that was serving educators was providing their social security numbers in addition to the other data that the site was providing. It was not intended to provide that. It was supposed to provide credentials like their teaching credentials, so you could look those up and see whatever your kindergartners, teachers' credentials were. You can go look them up. Well, embedded in the HTML that was returned by the server, it was this teacher's social was included. Wasn't encoded, was just in there in the HTML. The journalist contacted the state, pointed out that this was a serious privacy breach and that they needed to get that taken down and corrected immediately. And the governor's office, the site has been taken offline, and the state IT department swung into action and immediately started calling the journalist a hacker, and the governor's office said that the journalist had hacked the website's source code and discovered this data that wasn't supposed to be publicly available. And God damn it!
Here. I'll play Missouri Governor Mike Parsons. Fixing the flaw is going to cost the state $50 million. And we are going to vow that we're going to seek prosecution and investigation against the hackers and anyone who aided in the publication in its attempt to embarrass the state and sell headlines for their news outlets. That was pretty much what he said.
Yeah, that was well done.
I was hoping that this would be brought out tonight, so I joined in. Was the social security numbers actually stored plain text in the HTML code? Sorry, markup to be accurate.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, all you had to do was right-click view page source or use DevTools, and you could see.
No private information was publicly visible, but teachers' social security numbers were contained in the HTML source code of the pages. In a letter to teachers, Education Commissioner Maggie I'm going to mess up this last name, Van Deven, said an individual took the records of at least 3 educators, unencrypted the source code of the web page, and viewed the social security number of those specific educators. The DESE called the person who discovered the vulnerability a hacker.
I want to be, well, I didn't want to be, and I'm glad I wasn't. I want to be a fly on the wall.
So
I want to bid to rebuild this website.
Who looked at them and said, dude, they right-clicked.
So
that
as
is not decoding anything. And
it sounds like he hacked his own computer, I guess, if it was on his web browser.
So as a front-end developer, full stack anyways, I'm sure that I will be confirmed here that most of my peers, when we start out programming, we've all gone to sites where we seen something and we're like, ooh, I like that. How do they do that? And we have 12.
If that's hacking, man, I've been hacking since like freshman year of high school.
Peter, you're now a hacker.
So I told my boss Monday morning, I'm going to need a written document, because it can't be oral. It's got to be written. Something I've learned from all the podcasts I've listened to. It's got to be a written agreement, co-signed by the CSO and the CEO, that says I have permission to view all of the client's
source
HTML code.
So you kind of joke, but you really should have that. It's bad, and it's not funny, but there are a lot of situations where you'll come across stuff, and you might have to actually have that.
Yeah, I will tell you, when we deal with clients and stuff, I have a great plugin on Chrome, by the way, called Retire.js. Let me I'm gonna stop presenting and see if I can reshare your entire screen. Let's do this one real quick. Can you? Yeah. So right here, can you guys see this? Retire.js.
Yeah,
Great plugin. I'm trying to think of a site I could go to. Let's try it.
I'm gazing into the infinite abyss of our.
There we go. I knew FBI Gov wouldn't let me down. Right. I knew that. So right there, this is what Retire.js does. Right. It calls out when there are pretty much third parties. You can see jQuery 1, Bootstrap. It'll call out when there's vulnerable stuff. And again, I knew the FBI.gov site wouldn't let me down. It never lets me down.
Pro tip.
Yeah. No, this is a great plugin. So if you don't have this, problem is that if we go to certain sites, we've run into this with like vendors and stuff. They will try to call out that we've done an assessment. We've done a security assessment on their site. I just loaded a plugin, and it's calling out what's being loaded, right? And you could probably just go view page source here, and you can. That's all it's looking at, right? That's all it looking at is this code behind here to show that it's loading some known vulnerable jQuery and Bootstrap.
But it's comparing it against a vulnerability database.
Correct, but it's not. Yeah, so it's a vuln scan. It's not an actual security assessment, right? But to Jeff's point is you have to be careful about this stuff, right? Because some people will try to call you out on it. Yeah. It's we all get it. You can come here and laugh with us about it. But I have had to deal with this like at my day job where like we've had to be careful about how we deliver some of this stuff because people will be like, you just did a security assessment on our site. You're a bad person. And it's like, no, I have a browser plugin that tells me when you're running something stupid.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You served me up this content. I get to interrogate it however I want to.
But this goes back to that. There's still people with mindset. This Missouri governor, Mike Parson, has that mindset.
It'll rapidly get thrown out of court because the ruling is at this point, you're allowed to interrogate the content served to you by the web server however you want. If there's no authentication in front of it, you didn't have to put in any kind of password. That is publicly available, freely available to anybody who looks at it.
Right.
That's not going to stop a lawyer from arguing it though, and tying up resources.
Yeah, it'll waste a couple of lawyers' time and make them a bunch of money.
Yep.
Anyway,
so, that was the news. Anything else anybody wants to bring up that we didn't cover? If not, we're going to move on to a fun new segment.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah.
You shouldn't call it fun.
It's the cool wall. This is a lot of fun, right? This is the cool wall.
You accuse it of being fun, and then it won't be.
It will be. It was fun last week when we did it. So the idea here, I don't know if anybody is Top Gear fans. I'm going to go back. Hold on. I got to exit. I got to figure out how to exit this thing. Exit screen. So let's see. Yep. Cool wall, right? So any Top Gear fans, they have several different categories. That's where the picture was from. I'll go back to here. Yeah. So that picture right there. They put cars up and they put it into cool, uncool, seriously uncool, Sub-Zero. So we've replicated that here because me and Adam did this at work at one point when we worked together for 3 years, where we created our own cool wall and just plug stuff up there. Pretty sure we put Heartbleed up there. I don't know if at the time we put it up on cool, but we may have done it at uncool just because we had to actually deal with it. And for people that don't maybe understand this, it's not supposed to make sense. It's us arguing back and forth over. Should this be cool?
Tim and I we were looking for reasons to argue with each other, and this is what we came up with.
You need a reason?
More reasons. You can never have enough reasons.
So we did VPub last week. It's the second Wednesday. If anybody doesn't have an invite to our VPub, we do stuff like this, right? We go through this. I don't know if we do this going forward. We were just trying to populate it with some of the older stuff. Like I went back and looked through like 15 years worth of stuff that's popped up, and we wanted to try to populate it a little bit before we actually started getting.
Tim rattled through his old man brain and came up with this list of things.
No, I went.
That's-
No.
I'm looking for poodle.
Well, I thought we had. Well, we did have Heartbleed. See, that's the thing too. We can get really granular, so I try to pick some. Poodle was big, but I feel like Heartbleed was better.
Yeah.
I want to say we had like an open SSL card at this point. But again, yes, we can dive into the stuff. But this is something we want to make probably more of a regular thing. Where, for example, we have, although we don't have Facebook up here, what's the one like the Colonial Pipeline, SolarWinds, other stuff. And as a group here, we can kind of discuss a lot of these different things. Is it cool? Is it uncool? Is it Sub-Zero? Which means it's very. Don't start getting into stuff. Don't get ahead of the thing.
No, we're getting ahead.
No, and then there's permanently disgusting. So you see permanently disgusting. We have Adobe. We have South Carolina Department of Revenue. We have anything coin-based like Bitcoin. So, okay, Adam, which one do you want to cover first? I'll let you pick the first one.
I'm going to pick...
I am watching live chat, by the way, because it sounded like he was ready to go, and now you're like, oh,
I'm going to pick Rowhammer.
Rowhammer, okay.
I'm going to put that on Uncool.
Oh, yeah. By the way, Adam has access to this, so he can just change shit on me.
Unless someone argues with me that it's cooler than that.
I can see where it's cool because it's flipping bits, man. It's also got a really great name.
It's flipping bits. I get the XKCD about magically flipping bits, but has it ever actually done that in the wild?
They are turning it into more of an exploitable thing, like because early on in the research they were like, well, how are you gonna actually?
If you can put me a link to an actual exploit in the wild that actually uses that.
Oh no! There's nothing that uses it
right.
currently. But that
it's a very cool idea that doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah,
which is like a lot of my ideas, which makes it uncool.
But no, that's the whole point. Is that it would be uncool because then we'd actually have to deal with it. Right now, it's cool because we did. If we come back, if it becomes exploitable, I will say we move it to uncool.
I disagree. Then it belongs in cool.
What?
It's a cool thing you can do with the hardware to actually get code execution. Now it's just a neat idea someday I had that he can't actually make work. Okay, we're doing a bunch of hullabaloo about nothing. Anyway,
so that's the idea, right? So anybody can chime in with their take on stuff. That was.
Does somebody have something they want to add?
Does anyone know what Rowhammer is? Look up Rowhammer. It's really cool stuff. But clearly, because we put it in. Oh wait, I'll move it back to uncool. You were supposed to grab it and move it back to uncool. That's how this works. Also, Corey has access just to at the end of the day, Corey will have all.
As much as we milk it, I think we have to put the Verizon data breach report under seriously uncool.
Uncool? No, I think it's very cool.
So Sub-Zero?
Yeah.
You're saying Sub-Zero. I would agree with Jeff. I think it's great research.
But
yep. Now I'm not talking about
all the appeal, all the curb appeal of a wet newspaper.
It's actually very readable.
It also shows what it gives a lot of reason that we do the things that we do, right? It's showing the impact in organizations. It's showing across sectors of economics where things are happening and how much it's changing from year to year. And that if you want to try and talk to your bosses about trying to get more money for cybersecurity, you just look at the trend that's exponentially growing of attacks that are happening across things. And if people want to say we need concrete examples, go to it.
Go to the Patriot industry too, right? Because you don't have to read the whole thing. You just read the first part and then go to your industry and boom.
What I don't like about it is it helps Verizon get sales of their security assessments, and their security assessments are shit. They I had one where they came in and said I was actually tasked with resolving an audit finding from the Verizon assessment. And so I came and said, well, show me the audit finding. And it said, we did an interview and we found that you're not terminating access promptly. And I said, well, okay, show me which terminations. Show me who turned. Oh, well, we did an interview. Well, then, okay. Well, then to remediate that, just interview me and I'll say we didn't do it. Now, remediate, like what? Oh, we didn't look at any records. We just asked somebody who thought they knew of some time when they thought this didn't happen.
Yeah. They're not
Yeah,
the
but-
only ones
but
guilty
those
of
are-
that, though.
Those are bad auditors, and you can answer those.
Well, I will say, and the Verizon DBR team is different from those types of people. I
Right.
get what you're saying, though, is that
But they got the sale. They got the sale because Verizon's name is on that data breach thing, is why they got the sale of doing their assessment. And then their assessment was 50 pages of audit findings that were uncomprehendable.
But the Verizon doesn't even use their security team. It's like aggregate information. I get what you're saying. That to me is a misuse of the report.
Yeah. So because of that, it like soiled their name for me.
Yeah.
Fair
I
enough.
can understand that. That's fair enough. They're still saying it's Sub-Zero. Sorry.
I like how
Let's
you
get
ask
into
for
analysis.
input and then
Yeah.
denounce
All
all
right.
input.
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Tim does that. Tim does that frequently.
I mean, I'd be okay with it going to cool because of the potential of misuse
Oh,
by
I'm
other
happy to move it
organizations.
back to cool.
No,
I'm happy to downgrade it.
no.
Anyway,
We could do this
all right.
All
All right.
right.
Who's got another one? Does anyone got another one? The thing we really want to cover on the left side here?
It doesn't have to be on the left side. You got another thing you want to throw in the cool wall. Pick it.
Oh yeah. If you have. All right. I want to do solar ones. I really actually do want to do solar ones because I think it's actually cool. Like I think it's a really cool breach. It started this whole supply chain attack thing. I know it interrupted a bunch of people's days. I'd almost throw it in Sub-Zero actually.
I'm kind of in the Sub-Zero camp, frankly, just because it was such a comprehensive kicking over of
It was
a
brilliant.
tool that everybody needs. Like everybody uses it.
Right, but it's not even that too. It's like you look at the code and they're like, "We're not going to run if these things are on the machine." Right?
It's a extremely comprehensively competent software supply chain attack. It doesn't get any
Sub-Zero
better
for me.
than that.
It's Sub-Zero for me because they used all their signing certificates to sign everything appropriately. So there was never an indication that it was wrong.
Totally looks legit.
Yeah.
Super sophisticated.
All right, Sub-Zero. Unless anybody has anything else. Okay.
All right, last one I want to do is Chrome. And I'm going to be an asshole and drop it in uncool. I'm just sick to death of Chrome dropping. Oh, look. Here's a critical vulnerability in Chrome. Thanks again for the 15th day straight.
Yeah, it belongs right next to Adobe, wherever that winds up.
If it belongs next to Adobe, then it's perfectly disgustingly uncool.
It does not belong to Adobe because they fix the problems.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And also again, I am using Chrome for everything right here, so I really can't have it in the uncool. And also, again, I will go back to my previous point. Oh, you can't see it on the presentation here. But if you look in the top right, retired JS is up there, right? And I'm clicking on it right now. You can see my arrow over it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one there for Trello. Thanks, Trello. So I'm moving it up to uncool.
All right, I'll
I
accept
can maybe give it.
uncool.
Yeah, I would actually say it's cool, but I can understand people's angst with it. But that I will also say because Adobe is dead or dead, right? Because we know what's there. I would, yeah.
Long
It's become
live
the new-
Adobe.
All right. I think this is enough for one night. Let's kick it on over and do the next thing.
Mental health hackers.
Go see some therapy.
Yep. I think we're coming. I think people are getting out a little bit more. But there's still, I think, some ramifications from this that are gonna, kind of be highlighted. It's behavioral health has become a thing that people are recognizing, because the pandemic was not great for a lot of the behavioral health as well as people's health in general. But we're starting to see with people working from home and doing all this other stuff. I know, especially during the early part of the pandemic, it was like, yeah, go outside and take a walk. I took a walk today. I did work from home today. I was in the office yesterday, which was great because I got to see some people that I hadn't seen in a while. But if you are working from home, make sure that you're getting outside just for a walk, even if it's like 30 minutes. Go walk the dog, get some vitamin D. I knew I was going to be in, like, I had meetings all day. Another strategy that I take that a lot of people might be able to take is just go sit outside for a meeting, right? If you have like a meeting that you have to pay attention to, go sit outside. Enjoy the weather a little bit. It does wonders.
Hoskins, how many days have you been wearing that shirt? Go outside. Take a walk. No, I would love to go out in the garage and spend some more time doing woodworking, but for some reason they complain when I run a circular saw during a meeting.
Yep.
But I will also say that surprisingly, a lot of your insurance covers mental health visits, so you can go and see a therapist a few times a month, and it's completely covered. Pay a copay. That's it. So
yeah, check what your companies are doing, because like we have, and I've had to do this for a couple of my employees prior to the pandemic for marital issues. You can get, like at our work, we could get the people that I had could have up to like 5 sessions with a professional right before they had to start paying, right? So some of those benefits might be available to you by your company, and I would definitely check out. I think this is annual enrollment time. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like a lot of people are doing annual enrollment for benefits for next year right now.
I work for an insurance company, and I still don't understand how that works, but okay.
But you can still, again, it's a lot to dive into, but and if you don't go to the website, and I'm sure they might have resources there as well.
Yeah.
Jeff, are you in a position to introduce, or do you need me to?
Well, yeah. So we have Brandon Poole with us today. He's a fantastic individual. He's been with us for a while, presented a few times, and today he wants to talk about cyber doomsday prepping.
It would only have been better if you said peppering. Cyber doomsday.
No, I'm
peppering.
good with pressing.
Pepper spraying. Yes.
Pepper spraying.
We've had a lot going on. There's a lot of ways that you need to respond to incidents and things that happen. And Brandon wants to talk to us tonight about good ways to deal with that. So, I think we'll take 5 minutes, and then
we will after we go to our sponsor slide.
Oh yeah. Well,
yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. Reached out to EITS, and they were gracious enough to sponsor us tonight. If you don't know EITS, we got a couple of them on the call tonight, so reach out to them if you need any help with IT security. I think several of us here have done business with them in the past, so they also sponsor a local happy hour, so they're a good local company that likes to drink beer like the rest of us. So I want to thank them. And also a couple of our continuing sponsors. One day, maybe soon, we'll get back to the incubator. Once all this gets taken care of and everybody goes and does their stuff. So yes, we will take a 5-minute intermission. Go refresh your beverage. We'll get Brandon set up to present, and we'll be back in a couple minutes. thanks again to Brandon for presenting to us this evening, and take it away, Brandon.
Yeah, so just a heads up, I'm gonna keep this kind of informal. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute and interrupt me. And if you eat up too much of my time, I'll just hush you and we'll move on.
Oh,
So,
good.
Wait for it now.
Here's a question. Here's a question. You will regret saying this.
oh, I'm sure I will before the end of the night. So yeah, so tonight's presentation: Cyber Doomsday Prepping. How to prepare and survive an incident response engagement. So before I kick this off, I'm gonna go ahead and say a lot of this is just anecdotal stuff that I've seen. For those of you who do not know me, my name is, of course, Brandon Poole, which would have been helpful to put on the slide, but it was on the previous slide. I've been in IT and security for over 12 years. I've helped build out numerous SOCs and DFIR teams, both in the private sector, public sector, and even on the commercial side. Currently, I'm a principal security consultant for EITS, and I am a semi-retired associate instructor for SANS. I retired right after COVID. When the COVID apocalypse broke out, I was in Denver teaching the SANS 504 class. Then decided that I'd lay low for a while, and I will probably come out of retirement like this time next year, or at least that's what I tell myself. But yeah, so I've been around the block a lot. A lot of what I've done has been incident response. And this whole kind of presentation is just based off things that I personally have found helpful, putting together incident response plans, helping people prepare, and what I've seen when I have responded to and acted as a digital forensicator, incident responder on the vendor side. So the syllabus, now that you're in prepper school, going to break it down. Introduction to incident response, becoming a cyber prepper. Then we got to level you guys up to Doomsday Prepper. Then we're going to talk about bug out bags and go bags, because, you know, that's a must have for a prepper. So introduction to incident response. We're going to kick this off good old fashioned English 101 style with definitions, because who doesn't love definitions?
Oh, God, no.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no. I love definitions. I think they're good.
All right. So anyways, we're going to define an event as any observable occurrence on a system or network. So examples of this could be like a user logging in, a system crash, a log being generated, watching someone open evil.exe, which I'm sure is not like, you know, foreboding or anything like that. Really anything that you see, observe, anything of that nature is what we call an event. Now, an incident, any type of event or group of events that, you know, affect the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of a system, data, or violation of a company's security policy. Pretty common, you know, definition there, right? Anyone, I guess, argue, disagree with any of these definitions so far? No? Okay.
Everyone likes to, but no, they're clear.
Well, this isn't a college class. This isn't your mom's incident response stuff. Unfortunately, we as like cybersecurity professional incident responders, we don't get to define incidents anymore. You know, 10 years ago, when we were writing our IR plans, we got to define incidents. Here in the last 5 years, like lawyers have gotten involved and stuff like that, and they define what an incident is. So many times I have ran into situations where, due to certain regulatory requirements or certain compliance reporting guidelines, companies have had to get creative in defining what an incident is in order to avoid having to report certain things or pay fines or engaging certain parties. So, you know, that definition we gave before, like everyone kind of generally agrees with that, but I have been a part of some organizations where it's not an incident unless it happens in this critical company like segment or in the OT network. Everywhere else is not an incident. It's only incident in these certain segments. If it happens on, you know, this other segment, it's not an incident. This really kind of breaks down that, you know, security is risk management and business enablement's king. Like, you know, we can't define an incident however we want to, because, you know, it will impact the business. There will possibly be a fine related to that. There will be, you know, a big drag if I have to bring in like general counsel and have all these meetings and whatnot. And then, as I said, like lawyers dictate the rules. So let's move on to English 102. So an incident now is insert whatever word your general counsel, regulatory body, or compliance standard says is an incident. Because we got to get creative with this stuff, guys. And what we'll do is we'll use some of that same creative logic, and we'll just call an adverse security event is an event or group of events that affects the blah, 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 blah. Same thing as before. So this is a creative way when you're building out your incident response plan, if you do run into these things, to kind of define these things out. You know, an incident might now be, you know, an incident based off some way you don't really care for it. You just define everything else as an adverse security event and pretty much just treat it as an incident.
Can I ask, are you primarily working with like top 1,000 companies?
A lot of what I've, in a lot of cases that I see this type of language, yes, it is going to be like Fortune 1000, Fortune 500. Recently, it's been like a Fortune 100. I've seen them try to go around and dance around how they define an incident.
Yeah, see, because that's where I feel like a lot of this stuff is based on, because they get in trouble with the SEC, they get in trouble with all these, like you said, regulatory. So they're pulling in legal counsel to really massage some of these things.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, in some cases, not even necessarily that you're a Fortune 1000. If you just want to have like a global presence, especially in like Europe, you got GDPR. Okay. And, you know, they've got certain reporting guidelines on what classifies an incident there. And it's just really confusing also as a corporation to say, well, you know, if it's an incident and it occurs on this state or this continent or in this data center, it's an incident, not in this incident. So usually what happens is they get together with legal counsel and just to make everything as like easy as possible, they'll just come up with some broad incident. Just, no matter where it is, location.
This is a response, not an incident. We're responding to something. This is not an incident.
Yeah, that's exactly why we have that adverse security event. And that's one thing that if you are in one of these organizations that, you know, they are very prim and proper and very surgically precise with how they define an incident, make sure that you have in your incident response plan, like something kind of like this adverse security event or something of a similar nature to kind of dictate the difference between like an event and then an incident. But you know, the adverse security event is still something you're going to need to respond to. And throughout this presentation, I'll go back to just using incident, but you can just as easily use it to refer to an adverse security event if you're in one of these situations.
If you're wondering why your lawyer looks uncomfortable in its chair, it's because you've used the I word.
Well, it gets worse. Because we're back in grade school, folks. Back in grade school. You know, in grade school, you know, you always had kids like tattle on you, like, oh, he said the A word, he said the F word. Now we are mature, grown-up security professionals, and it's the same way. You can't say the B word. Say breach again. The double dog dare you. Yeah, so don't say breach. So for those who aren't like doing incident responding, you know, as a full-time gig, this may be like a little odd. I think a lot of people this day and time has had this somewhat beaten into them, just in case you haven't. A breach has a very specific legal meaning. Do not say breach unless you've been told to do so by a lawyer or your general counsel. And even then, they'll tell you not to. If you send in an email and instead of putting incident, you say breach, and then that is discoverable, that can have huge implications because now someone's discovered something. You said the B word. So you had a breach. You didn't report the breach. You know, these breach guidelines say that if you had a breach, and oh my gosh, just completely and totally like blows up. So yes, whatever we do, do not say the B word, period, point blank.
What about a PB? a potential breach.
That is still I can tell you. Yeah, that is still like heavily frowned upon. That's like just saying like I didn't say the F word, I said the MF word. Like,
okay.
Just throwing another word in front of it doesn't make it necessarily any better.
I said I was going to the beach. I know where the R is bad.
But you have a South Carolina education, so you messed it up.
South Carolina has some great beaches. Beaches.
Autocorrect, man, gets you every time.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Tim, fuck you.
So, incident response. So, I think everyone's kind of familiar with these. Everyone's seen them before. You haven't. The one on the left is like the NIST incident response guidelines you'll see in all their stuff. The one on the right is a little more familiar with some people. A lot of people refer to as the SANS pickerel method. It's actually not SANS though. If you actually spent some time, it's actually a Joint Chief of Staff, pretty much DoD world kind of incident response model that was created back a long time ago for cybersecurity incidents back in like the early 90s. And SANS just kind of adopted it. Now, one important thing to kind of note is you see there's arrows on both of them that's kind of going for preparation to detection analysis or preparation to identification, then containment. This nice little waterfall type situation. If you've ever seen the old waterfall diagrams, it's going to look very similar, especially the one on the right-hand side, that pickerel one. But you also notice how there's all these little curvy arrows where they go up and back up and up and up and up. And so I don't know if this is a true story, but I will share why this is important. Is anyone familiar with a fellow by the name of Winston Royce?
Sounds familiar, but no.
Okay, so Winston Royce's claim to fame was the waterfall method. If you've ever been a developer, project management stuff,
he's the bane of my existence.
Yeah, the whole waterfall guy. So a lot of people kind of they know him. Waterfall's not. Yeah, waterfall's not a very love thing. So if you go and you Google waterfall method, you'll see something like I said that looks kind of similar to the pickerel method over here on the right. And you'll see some older ones where they don't have these little arrows that go back up. This is a story. I have no way to verify this. This was told to me, but supposedly our good friend, Dr. Royce, was brought in, big Fortune 500 or 100 company back in the late 60s, early 70s, somewhere in that time frame. They were doing some early software development, and he was brought in because they're like, listen, we're developing the software, and the software just it's full of bugs, it's just not working. The waterfall method isn't working for us. We just don't understand. We're doing something wrong. So he gets in there and says, all right, I want to observe you. So as he was starting to observe things, he noticed that pretty much they would go and they get the requirements, and then if you look at the waterfall, after you get the requirements, you analyze the requirements, make sure that they make sense. And it's this whole process. And the problem that this corporation was running into is the folks that are in the project management position would never, during any phase, iterate back up if something didn't make sense. They're just like, no, the process is straight waterfall. You just keep going down. Or it's what he later became to call the frozen waterfall. There were no feedback loops or anything like that. And he criticized them. He's like, why, if you guys realize something doesn't work in the analysis stage up here near the top, why don't you guys just kind of loop back, kind of fix your requirements and then finish through? And they pretty much just looked at him, kind of stared blankly, supposedly, and said, well, the arrow's only pointing down. So the rumor, the story is that Dr. Royce got paid a shit ton of money to draw little arrows back up so they could now go to any other stage in the waterfall method. Like I said,
that's not how a waterfall works. Waterfall doesn't ever go back up.
Well, he drew all these little arrows, so at any point in time you can go back up to a former step and kind of work your way back up if something doesn't work out. Same thing here. You might identify something, and when you identify something, it's a false positive. So what you might want to do is you might want to go back to that preparation stage and maybe change the way you prepare to kind of cut down those false positives, maybe tune some of those rules, whatnot, from your IDS. If you get into the containment phase, it happens sometimes. You think you have something contained, you did a very poor job of that, and things go south. Same thing with eradication and recovery. At any point in time, something can go sideways, or you can discover new information and have to revisit something else you already did. And this is the way the incident response is supposed to work. It's not pretty in practice, let's say.
So it's more like a watermill.
Yeah, if you want to say that.
A what? A watermelon?
Watermill.
Watermill. So the water goes down like a waterfall, but then it can come back up because that's how a watermill works.
Oh, the big wheel thing.
Yes, the big wheel thing.
Got it.
Uh,
Sorry, I'm not a doctor.
All right.
I love that response from Jessica, by the way. Just the
Oh,
I didn't say it out loud. I typed it and I refrained from interrupting to say it. I just have to point that out.
Rather
So-
than say it out loud, Jessica preferred to add it to the permanent record.
I thought I was doing good by not blurting.
This is Colasec. We blurt.
It was completely off
Is
topic.
that, is
but
that our new
super
tagline?
exciting.
We blur.
like a goat. Yes, that should be a new tagline.
yeah,
That's going
so
on the Colasec shirt, like
Move
a
it.
goat.
moving on.
Blurting like a goat.
Now that we have kind of our definitions laid out, we kind of know the basics of like what incident response is a higher level. Let's take like a slightly deeper dive, and let's touch the basics. You know, let's get our prepper's checklist ready. Start prepping. Let's become a prepper. So, the number one thing to like prep or really do anything in life is get management buy-in. Like, listen, you can't do anything if the guy signing the checks or the boss man isn't on board. You know, probably the best way to think about this is, you know, this whole talk's based off like Doomsday Preppers. Has everyone here seen Doomsday Prepper? I know it's been off like National Geographic for a while.
Oh yeah.
So, for those of you who are unfamiliar, it was like this crazy show. A lot of people are just like, these people are completely like insane. And what they did was they built these compounds. They stockaded all this food, guns, ammo, alcohol, seeds, like whatever it was, to kind of prep for, in their mind, some doomsday scenario that would end the human race or cause society to collapse. You know, this could be like a solar flare knocking out all electronics and making them all inoperable. Nuclear winter, the magnetic poles shifting and changing, creating like huge storms, a bunch of different stuff. One thing that you did notice is these preppers on these shows, it was never like an individual, at all, ever. It was like a guy and his family, or he created like a compound or commune in some case, and they were all living together. And the reason that this is important is because you cannot survive and prep on your own. If everyone isn't on board, things are going to get really ugly when, shit hits the fan. I mean, that's just the way it is. We would like to think that, we can be like, Bear Giles or something crazy, or, we can go pull off a Castaway and just get a volleyball and paint it and call it Wilson or something like that. And we can just make it work. But that's not really the way it works. Like, you can do all the prepping you want in your organization to prepare for an incident response. If no one else is on board, no one's going to follow the process. No one's going to do things right. It's just not going to work out. So one of the big reasons I like to personally get management on board is because it's amazing to like see how many like brown nosers are in the organization. As soon as you get like management on board, everyone else seems to like fall in line. Everyone wants to play nice in the sandbox. So as soon as you get that management buy-in, it's really going to make your life a lot easier. Like, folks are going to be a lot more willing to kind of aid you in your efforts to try to set up an actual incident response plan, improve it, mature it the way that it needs to get matured. Now, the biggest struggle a lot of people have is, how do I develop support? If you're slightly more mature, kind of like the easiest way to do it is just report on like, incidents or adverse security events, as we talked about before, over, X time span. And probably the best way to talk about is patterns. Like, if you don't really have like a mature incident response capability built in house, really and truly, it's going to be like a lot of the same incidents over and over and over again. And if you can show that pattern and talk about the impact associated with that, the number of man hours lost, number of projects delayed because we had to like deal with these incidents, and if we just take care of that, it really, really kind of like would improve all these things. That's a quick and easy way to kind of get buy-in. Let's say you aren't that mature, or let's just say that, it's a slow quarter or something like that. Another good way to do it's just news articles on security events and incidents in the industry, especially if you can find things related to like the same industry vertical. So, if you're in like gas distribution, there's some interesting stuff that's happened here in this past year about ransomware attacks. really and truly, if you're in any industry vertical, you can find some interesting stuff in the news about ransomware attacks or other security incidents. If you want to take a more kind of like data approach, we kind of were touching on this earlier in the meeting, but Verizon's DBIR, Mandiant's M Trends, Red Canary's threat detection reports. This stuff provides like hard data with certain types of incidents. A lot of times they will include things like industry verticals. You can now speak intelligently about stuff, the impact of this, etc. And if you can go to someone, you can actually provide data and facts. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the whole FAIR methodology of trying to actually measure out and assign dollar impacts to risk and whatnot. If you can take some of this data and do like a really quick down and dirty like FAIR assessment, if it happened in your organization, what the impact would be and assign dollar amounts, that's a great way to kind of like sell management, because a lot of your management, especially at the high levels, that's the way they think. They're in the business to make money. They think in dollar and cents. If you can put it in dollar and cents, it's going to make your life a lot easier. All right, fantastic, Brandon. I got management buy-in. They're all there. What do I do next?
Can I interrupt you really quick?
Yeah.
So just to talk about, to touch on your thing about value that a asset provides, something that every company I've ever worked for has struggled with is identifying how much revenue this particular asset is worth, right? So if I go and turn this server off for an hour, how much money did the company just lose? That is difficult to quantify without a whole lot of business interviews and understanding. But when you get to this stage of the process, if you haven't done it, you're totally lost. You can't tell a server from a workstation. And not all workstations are created equal. The CEO's workstation is way more important than somebody on the front line. Like, the front line's replaceable. CEO, he's not having a good day, you're not going to have one either. So it's just that is, if you're in the inventory step and you've got the opportunity to go and build that into your process, do it now. You will thank yourself later.
Yeah, and going back to what I said, there's a whole thing out there called FAIR methodology. If you want, you can kind of Google it, and it's a way of quantifying that. And they have a lot of things that actually help with some of this, because a lot of people, as you alluded to, Adam, they just weren't really big on trying to sit down with the business and go through all these meetings and interviews, and they invest 400 hours and they still don't have a good understanding of it. FAIR has some really interesting methodologies on how to quickly get estimates with not as much effort. It's kind of a new up and coming thing. It's really kind of got a lot of popularity here in the last 2 or 3 years. So I really highly encourage anyone to listen to risk management and being able to quantify a lot of this stuff with dollar and cents to do that. So next step, a hedge fund manager, Boone Pickens. He is famous for saying a fool with a plan is better off than a genius without a plan. So guess what? Probably your next step is an incident response plan. So, this is true if you've ever watched Doomsday Preppers. All good preppers have a plan. The great ones have contingency plans for their original plan.
I have a fantastic plan to interrupt Brandon.
All right.
I have nothing of consequence to add other than she wanted to say hello.
Hi.
Hey, Sam. How are you?
Good. How are y'all?
She's my plan.
I have done
Hey,
no
Sam.
prepping for Doomsday.
Sorry, Brandon. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. So yeah, that's one thing I've noticed like way back in the day, and now I'm gonna have to go kick me on some Doomsday Prepper tonight after we get done here. But all the great ones, they had like a plan, and then they ran through their plan, and they had contingency plans. It was almost like we're familiar with the concept of fence in depth. They had like planning in depth, and that's really the way we've got to almost approach a lot of this stuff. Your incident response plan really, traditionally are like one large document. Tends to be either super structured, trying to be very precise, prescribing things out a exact certain way, or in the other direction, it tends to be like super hand wavy, like just kind of figure it out. And that's the way a lot of incident response plans are. And to be honest, like I kind of pretty much just consider that shelfware. Like a lot of those incident response plans and a lot of the incident response plans I've came across, even when I was doing like IRs, on the vendor side, like we would ask folks, like, you have an incident response plan? Can we take a look at it, make sure we follow your incident response plan? A lot of folks, if they had one, they'd say, yeah, we got one, but it's not practical. We paid, Deloitte to come in and write an IR plan. It's completely and totally unusable. And it's kind of like, all right, so you got it for compliance checkbox or something like that. Really and truly, like, a true IR plan shouldn't be one plan. The best way to look at it is a library of documentation. And the library of documentation places an emphasis on pragmatism and the human element, keeping the human in the loop. IR plans, they're very like prescriptive and try to like be detailed and whatnot. If they actually worked, you could essentially script all your IR actions out there and you would never need a person. Like, it would just work.
But you can do some of that, can't you? You can do some of that
to some degree.
Yeah, to some. You can do this stupid, right? It's.
Yeah,
but
the thing is, the threat landscapes change. Your organization changes over time. Your tech, everything changes. What you need to do is you need to keep that human element in there. This seems to be like a trend in our industry that I just don't understand. If you go back and you look at old Gartner stuff, when the IPS came out, Gartner held the IPS is going to put an end to security. Like, it's just automatically detect everything. The IDS is going to be dead. And yeah, there's still IDSs, still IPSs. There's more than us than ever. Like, it just doesn't work. You when you go that route, you tend to kind of pigeonhole yourself in such a way that, you have to focus on certain things and other things kind of just, I don't know. It just doesn't work out. That's what I'm trying to say.
Every time I have ever attempted, so I remember sitting in those presentations you're talking about. 10 years ago, IDS is going to solve all our problems. Then there's this whole SOAR concept where we're going to detect things and have scripts that automatically remediate and respond. And I remember thinking that was really impressive in the meeting, and then going back to my desk and then fighting to get a script that actually deployed the latest update of Adobe Acrobat Reader to all 1,000 of my workstations, because it worked on the first 600. And then the rest was fiddly bits, and there was some weird software configuration. The technician that did the install that day wasn't following the procedure, so it's not quite to spec, and it requires a different set of parameters. And Jesus Christ, the edge cases will murder you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you should automate, and we'll touch on this in a little bit. If you can automate something, you should, especially where errors can be very costly. And that way you do have like a repeatable process, and you know that your room for error in those cases are very, very, small. But as you're saying about SOAR's been a little bit better. If you talk to people who actually seem to be in the know, and there seem to be more people in the know, the purpose of a SOAR platform is really just to kind of make the human more efficient. And that's really the way that we have to think of the IR plan. The IR plan, like I said, it shouldn't be a plan. It's a library of documents. And really and truly, the human is the brain in that. They're driving the process. And that library of documentation should be there to aid and support, a person. People are really good at solving problems. They're not really good at remembering information. That IR library should really be there for kind of reference for us to say, okay, if I need to take this action, how do I do this? Not really trying to derive every small little thing. And we'll touch on that kind of in depth here throughout the whole thing.
Well, one question I had, would you consider an IR plan? Because one of the terms I've heard is playbook.
Oh, so we're going to touch on that right now.
Okay, that's a different side. Yeah.
Okay. So really and truly, what I say, is IR plan, library, the parts of a great incident response plan. Like I said, if you want to go with that huge, like mammoth kind of IR plan, you can. I'm really against it, kind of, even if it is, the way we say it, one document. It's been proven with studies. If you have a document more than 5 pages, people just have a tendency not to read it, or they have a tendency to like skim. Really and truly, like, if you want someone to read something, pay attention and like digest it, it needs to be 3 or 4 pages. So it is probably much better to have like a library of smaller things. That doesn't mean you should just completely modularize things in such a way that, you have 1 million documents. You've got to kind of best fit it for your organization. But the idea is you can kind of break it down to a couple different pieces. So like one of them would be like a severity and classification guide. So this is just going to go through, every incident's not the same. If I get an AV alert on one of my endpoints that, so and so downloaded a Word document and it's got some old macro code in it, but it's not doing anything malicious, is that an incident? Maybe, maybe not. A lot of that's going to depend on how you classify it, right? What's the severity? If I go and I have like an AV, alert for, let's just say a pup, potentially unwanted program. If that pops up at 11 p.m. at night, I can go call my CISO, be like, hey, we got MindSpark on like a PC over here. What do you want me to do? Like, I'd be kind of upset if I was a CISO and you called me, overnight. So having the severity classification guide is a good idea. And based off that classification severity, we can kind of play into some of these other things like the communication plan. All right. So if it's this severity and we classify the incident this way, who do I need to communicate with? How do I need to actually communicate? What do I need to communicate with them? Another part of that is like your resources. What resources do I have? Who are my points of contact? A RACI. RACI diagrams is something that I've probably just fell in love with here, I don't know, the last couple of years. Being able to actually say who's responsible for what actions during the incident response and who's supporting them and whatnot. That's a beautiful thing if you take the time to actually build out and do, especially if it's based off per role. And then you actually define who the people in those roles and your point of contacts. Response capabilities is something we're going to dive in on a little bit later, but being able to actually document out all the different response capabilities you have and then how to actually implement those, we'll cover that in the Doomsday part because it is a little bit more advanced. Also, evidence handling and investigation documentation, kind of what you were alluding to, Tim, is playbooks kind of fit here. Playbooks, and this is kind of pet peeve of mine, there's a big difference between playbooks and runbooks. So a playbook is just like, in sports. You have a play called from your playbook. Quarterback walks up the line, reads the defense. And if it's not working, doesn't look like it works, he can call an audible. He can do some other stuff. Playbooks are designed to be flexible. They're designed to be modular. You can pull them in and out. A lot of playbooks don't really, in my opinion, really relate well to incident response because otherwise you have like a million different incident response plans. Playbooks are more helpful in that initial triage and investigation. So more of that SOC type work. So this is the way that we go and we validate and verify a, ransomware incident. Really and truly, we don't want to have a completely separate incident response plan for necessarily, TrickBot versus Emotet versus Trojan versus Worm. There might be some slight nuances and whatnot, but really and truly, we want to kind of rely more on that human brain and that response capability documentation to drive that, the person's expertise. If you try to dictate all that stuff out and you have someone who's not an expert in that, you might force them to take an action they're uncomfortable with, which could cause issues later down the line. You want someone to kind of operate in the area that they're comfortable with, that they have knowledge on, but then provide them the support in this documentation. The other big thing is, your DR BC plan, disaster recovery business continuity plan, especially if they're getting back up and running. So those are kind of like the big things. There's some other things that we'll touch on as we go on, but those are kind of like the big pieces of documentation, kind of the big categories I see in the incident response library. Adam, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah. So did you define RACI? Did you just explain what that acronym means?
Yeah, very, very high level. So a RACI chart is pretty much just going out and defining 4 roles: who is responsible, who is accountable, who is kept informed, pretty much who in what role and how they play into an activity, whether or not they're the person actually doing it, whether they're the person who's held accountable for whether it's done or not done, or whether or not they're informed that an action is being taken, but they really have no input into it.
The compliance nerd in me loves RACI charts. They're very, very important. So another question, the severity and classification guide, my gut tells me that that's something that you shouldn't make any more complex than you could fit on a couple of slides, maybe a couple of posters that you could hang on the wall to make it very obvious to your incident responders what needs to be, like how to classify things. Do you think that should be more involved in that?
We'll touch on that. Really and truly, it depends on, the correct answer to all this is it depends on the business needs, right, and kind of like your risk tolerance and whatnot. Yep. There are ways to distill more I guess, complex things into a simplified form. So you can come up with very simple kind of like matrix charts and then just quickly use matrix charts by checking different attributes to kind of quickly do that. And if you're breaking it down this way and it's not so much like all these verbal guidelines, but rather not like, go here. If we classify the incident as ransomware, we classify the incident as malware, we classify the incident as insider threat, and then the data on the system. So the asset classification is this, you pretty much just follow through multiple lines and, boom, there's your incident classification. That kind of stuff works out really well, especially if you get a little bit more advanced, but what you're using and what goes into that, the secret sauce really kind of depends on your organization, your risk profile, a bunch of different factors, compliance guidelines, etc. So it's what makes sense for you. Yeah. In general, the idea is to try to keep, pretty much follow kits for as much of this as possible. Keep it simple, stupid. But life is complex. There's a lot of edge cases. Sometimes we have to make things a little bit more complex than what we want it. So don't make it overly complex because you just want to be a nerd and be cool. But don't try to necessarily, simplify it to a point where it's not realistic or doesn't do what you need it to do. There are ways to kind of distill the information and find the happy medium.
That makes sense, but also I feel attacked.
Oh, sorry. Any other questions before we move on? All right. Hearing none, we will move on. All right. So number 3, because this is the basics, cyber insurance. If you do not have cyber insurance this day and age, I really just don't know how to help you. Incidents are super costly. Recovery from them super costly. Insurance, that's the reason they exist. Same way in medicine. I go and I get in a terrible car accident. It might be really expensive to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. But insurance, pull some money together with some other people, pull in risk, pull some of that money out, help cover that. Cyber insurance is broken right now. I will say that it is an unscalable model. You can do some Google searching. Really and truly, a lot of the ransomware that we see now has been perpetuated by cyber insurance. Insurance companies viewed it as a cash cow. They pretty much just ask people you got a firewall, you got antivirus, sure, pay us this much money and we'll insure you. Cybersecurity was a hot thing. There's a lot of FUD around it, but there wasn't really a whole lot of incidents. Ransomware providers found that they could do that, have the insurance firm pay the ransom on their behalf. And it kind of just perpetuated this nasty little thing where, ransomware has now exploded. You have some smaller insurance providers that's completely dropped cyber insurance. They don't even offer it anymore. And you've got a lot of big organizations out there like AXA. They're trying to understand, how to build actuary tables now about the stuff, how to actually measure out this risk so they can actually come up with a premium that makes sense for you. It's definitely kind of an immature field. Hopefully it will mature pretty quickly because the way that it's going right now is there's a lot of insurance companies losing money over cyber insurance. But that's not a reason for you not to have it. 100%. We're all about protecting you, not really kind of the industry at large right now. So if you do get a cyber insurance, insurance, the nice thing about them is if you have a cyber incident or an adverse security event, as we said before, you call up your insurance provider, tell them what's going on. They will actually provide you a breach coach, which is just a fancy say of saying a lawyer or law firm to act as general counsel on your behalf. They usually specialize in digital and privacy law. So they really kind of understand a lot of the things you're going through and can speak intelligently about regulatory and compliance guidelines. They also reach out and sign you a digital forensic incident response firm. If things get really, really, really bad, they can actually also work with you and get you a public relation firm to handle all of the nasty stuff on the front. So they kind of have those connections as medical insurers do. They've negotiated rates. They've kind of got their preferred providers. They're kind of, I guess you could say, in network, and that's the way they operate. Another important thing is kind of a downside of it, and one thing I'd recommend is it is helpful for you to have your in-house general counsel or pay external general counsel to right size your cyber insurance policy for you. A lot of folks don't do this, but I really recommend this, and that's due to a lot of issues. Like the most famous one was NotPetya, and I'm trying to remember. I believe it was the Zurich Institute. They were very famous for saying they weren't going to make payments against NotPetya because it was a cyber attack and it was a nation state attack. So they tried to fight and not pay anything out for that. And I do think they did pay out a little bit, but it was not anywhere near what the policies were for. So having legal counsel to kind of go through these terms and conditions and help you right size the policy and figure out who the right insurance provider for you could be really helpful. And I'd really kind of suggest you look into that. Another important thing is if you get cyber insurance, be sure to include the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and the 1 H of how you contact and utilize your insurance provider in your IR plan. This is another thing. A lot of organizations that I've worked with, we get in there, they called whoever I worked for at the time, call me, they say, hey, we got an incident. First question I usually ask, do you have cyber insurance? Yeah, we got cyber insurance. All right. You called them? We're not really sure how to contact them or who to contact. Oh, it just turns into a mess. That could delay your response by hours. So just go ahead when you get the cyber insurance, get all those points of contacts, work them into your incident response plan, what you need, how you contact them. That way, when you do have an incident, you just open up that plan or that document in your library, go to it, and then bada bing, bada boom. So, the next portion of this is going to be, get a retainer. So, Brandon, you just told me that, if I got cyber insurance and I got breached, that they'll provide an incident response firm for me. Why do I need a retainer? All right, so let's go ahead and just talk about like the pros and cons of this. So an incident, call your cyber insurance company, have an incident. They're going to call you up and they're going to assign a breach coach. The way it works is these breach coach are law firms, and then they kind of have their pick out there of who they want to use. So law firms typically have favorite DFIR providers. They know who's on the insurance list, and so they'll call up, Verizon if Verizon's their favorite for whatever reason, or they'll call up so-and-so, or they'll call up whoever their favorite provider is. Their favorite provider is usually advantageous for them because maybe it allows them to keep a little bit more profit. Maybe it's a lower quality incident response vendor. Maybe it's like a mom and pop shop. It's some of these insurance providers at one point in time, it was pretty easy to get on. They've made it a little bit harder for incident response firms to get on now. But at one point in time, like you could get some, mom and pop firms, never done incident response before, but saw as a cash cow. So you don't know who necessarily you're getting. So it's a good idea to have kind of a retainer. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this. There's no cost retainer versus paid retainer. No cost retainer, of course, is there's no cost to it. And a lot of people are like, why wouldn't I just take the no cost retainer? Well, the no cost retainer does not guarantee you that, if you have an incident, they will be available. Essentially, all you're doing is you're getting their MSA, you're signing their MSA, handling all the legal stuff. So when you have an incident, you don't have to go through this whole legal procurement process. That being said, if you do want to use someone kind of like on your insurance provider, a lot of those folks do offer no cost retainers. So reach out to your insurance provider, say, hey, give me a list of folks that are your kind of in-network vendors. Start calling them up, do some interviews. If you like them, get 2 or 3 no cost retainers with them. So when you do have an incident, you do get assigned that breach coach. You can say, hey, I know DFIR firm XYZ are in network. I would like to use one of those 3 because I already have like a no cost retainer for them. We've got everything signed. It's already in place. We can get rocking and rolling. And usually, if you got 2 or 3 of them in place with whoever's on your cyber insurance provider list, you're good to go. Paid retainer. You're paying, but what you're doing is you're getting that guaranteed service. Usually that you're getting a bucket of hours, whatever bucket of hours you don't use, you can kind of make use for other things. So maybe like doing some tabletop exercises or whatnot. Now, what happens if neither of these providers or the provider you want's not on your insurance program? As long as you do this before the incident, you can call up your insurance provider, say, hey, I really like this firm, yada, yada, yada. I want to use them. A lot of times that vouching for them can actually get them on the preferred provider for your insurance company. It just takes like a couple weeks. Another thing to kind of think about if you're getting an incident response retainer is maybe you do use the free kind of whoever for, your IR. But if you're in manufacturing, you got an OT network or something like that, there are specialty firms out there that specialize in like OT kind of incident response engagement, digital forensics. There are firms out there that are a little bit stronger in the Linux side of the house, cloud, if you're heavy in the cloud. These are some things to kind of keep in mind. You know, large Fortune, we were talking about large Fortune 100 organizations earlier. There are large Fortune 100 organizations, and they actually do paid retainers with, 4 or 5 firms, because the 4 or 5 firms have like different specialties. Maybe one's, super great at network forensics, and you have like all these full PCAP devices at your edge and stuff. Maybe one provider is great for your OT network. Maybe one provider is a little bit better at Linux forensics. You might have different providers kind of on the hook for different things depending on what it is you need. The other thing is, once you get that incident response retainer in place, a good thing to do is to follow up with them, and they can give you kind of like some guidance on prepping. They can also kind of give you some details of some stuff that if you were to engage them, what they will want going into that initial meeting. So a lot of that first meetings with these third parties, the way it ends up being is they end up asking for a bunch of information. You scramble to get the information, got to get back to them 30 minutes later. If you can go ahead and just get the type of information they're going to want, ahead of time before you actually have that, and then walk into that meeting prepared, that's going to be amazing. Last thing to include, once again, the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and that 1 H of how. Include that in your incident response plan on how to engage with them. All right, number 5, build relationships. This is like criminally unrelated in security in general, especially incident response. Building relationships is like key to making any incident response engagement kind of like work. Who do you want to build kind of these relationships with? Well, definitely people on your IR team, or anybody who may be involved in an incident. So network and sysadmins, go buy them some donuts, be friends with them. That way, when you need them to cut off like a port in the middle of the night, they're not going to give you a bunch of lip about it. Or, maybe if you need some help doing some remediation work, so you can whip up like a really quick PowerShell script. Help desk. Listen, back in my IT days and back when I worked for an organization, help desk was like the place to go. They get all the juicy gossip. They see everything. They know the patterns of organizations and whatnot. They can kind of clue you in a lot of times on incidents before they happen. They can kind of give you the gossip and a bunch of detail and a lot of information you wouldn't otherwise have. ISP engineers. Your ISP is your lifeline in a lot of cases. A lot of folks don't even know any ISP engineer or anyone at their ISP. Listen, if you have like a denial of service attack and you call your ISP and you don't know anyone there and you say, "Hey, I'm under attack, denial of service," what they're going to do is they're going to put you over to like a sales department, and they're going to try to sell you like some denial of service essentially. And you're going to talk to a salesperson. You're going to have to go through the procurement process, and it can be days before you get things like resolved. If you can find like pretty much like an engineer at your ISP, just chit chat with them. If you're a local guy, invite him out from beers, just try to get to know him. Have that point of contact, someone you can kind of reach out on the inside. A lot of times, like these ISP engineers, if you get on denial of service, they can know route things for you. They can take care of a lot of this stuff without you having to jump through this stuff, right? No cost for you. Another thing, local law enforcement. Law enforcement's an interesting can of worms, and I say that as I'm sure we do have like some sled on here, and that law enforcement's a double-sided sword. Like there are definitely a lot of benefits from working with law enforcement. Law enforcement, is required in sometimes, especially if it's PHI, PII, certain situations, regulatory compliance, depending on your jurisdiction. But it's being a good corporate citizen to kind of clue in law enforcement. A lot of times, like when you're clued in or you work with law enforcement, if there's ongoing kind of like criminal case, you are kind of privy to that kind of criminal discovery process. So you might be able to glean a little bit more intelligence that you wouldn't otherwise have, which can uncover, new rocks to kick over and maybe new containment actions or actions you need to do to protect yourself. But also, law enforcement goals, sometimes the downside of that is, they don't always have the same objectives as you. You're trying to get things back up, quickly as possible. They're trying to prosecute. If they don't want you to destroy evidence, they're going to want to do things kind of their way. They might seize equipment. I mean, there's some downsides to that too, but getting to know like the law enforcement officials can really kind of like help out. They're much more likely to work with you on things, work things out. You can kind of get around some of the cons that way if you get to know them. Great way to do that is just showing up to your like local InfoGuard meetings a lot of times. Legal counsel, of course, very important. HR, service providers. If you have like an outsourced SOC, let's say you don't manage your border firewalls, having that contact with your MSP, that way you can kind of know who to contact and whatnot. That really kind of like plays a big role. All right, I see we have a hand raised.
So with the ISP, like you just mentioned how you meet law enforcement. How do I meet my ISP person?
So that's that's a difficult one. So if you're a smaller organization, like really and truly the chance of you being able to talk to your ISP engineer is slim to none. When you start talking about like bigger organizations that have bigger impacts, so you're talking about, we have multiple ISPs, we got multiple routes out, we're doing like our own BGP peering, more advanced network infrastructure. A lot of times you're having to do things kind of in hand with the ISP because you're much more tightly integrated, and that's how you kind of build that connection. Another good way to do it is I don't know about y'all's area or anything like that, but I know where I locally am. Comporium is like the service provider here in the lower part of Lexington County. A lot of these guys kind of live locally in your area. Just putting in like a bogus service call that you could probably handle yourself, having one of them come out and just shooting some shit with them might be like a worthwhile thing, even if it's for nothing and you have to pay a little money just to kind of get to know them. Some of them show up to local user groups in certain areas. So, showing up to some of these local like networking events and whatnot and getting to know that way is another way. It's ISP engineer out of everyone on this list is probably like the hardest one to do, but it's definitely possible. You just might have to kind of get creative, and it really helps if you're a bigger organization.
Yeah, but I mean, like the bigger organizations, you might be dealing with multiple ISPs, right?
The idea is that you probably want to have like multiple contacts with each of the ISP.
Okay. All right.
Or the thing is, if you can get in with one ISP and let's say it is a denial service, maybe what you do is you close down the network connection, you quit doing the BGP peering for that one ISP that you don't have the connection for, but then you route everything through. You got a smaller pipe, but you can work with that one ISP, the one engineer you do know, to, like I said, do some null routing, do some creative things upstream to kind of mitigate that denial of service, even if you will have like less pipe and less bandwidth to work with.
Looks like Ryan has a question or wants to say something.
Mr. Trusky, go ahead.
Hey, Brandon. So since you're talking about law enforcement and me working for SLED, I would say that it's important to have contacts with your state law enforcement as well as the local, but reaching out to state is probably going to get you better results than your local law enforcement, just because it's more likely for the state entity to have better capabilities and understand how to help with the incident, rather than the local is basically telling you to stop what you're doing until we find out the answers that you need to know. And then you're just kind of put in a holding pattern.
Yes. You mean to tell me that Sumter County doesn't have a cybersecurity division?
Yeah, and once again, that's a big reason. Like InfoGuard, a bunch of law enforcement that is kind of in the know in cybersecurity, or even those that aren't, do show up to InfoGuard. But a lot of those folks can also direct you in the correct place. You also have like your field office for the FBI that normally show up. So InfoGuard is a great way of meeting kind of like that law enforcement community, I would say. Any other questions before we move on? All right. Oh, going the wrong way. All right, last one. So, pretty much number 6, review, update, and test the plan. Listen, we talked about it earlier. Incident response plans become outdated. Organizations change. People leave. Technology stacks change. It's just the nature of the beast. I mean, a lot of incident response plans that I've seen recently, they just don't work, period, because these folks have moved to the cloud, and you give up a lot of that control in the cloud, and some of that capability, some of that response action that you normally take just isn't possible anymore. And they don't really test their plan, so they don't really know, or they kind of consider that out of scope when they do test their incident response plan. Incident response plans, really and truly, ideally you want to update it and review it at least once a year. I will say that the key of going with the library approach, where it's not one plan, but multiple small plans as part of a library, this becomes a lot easier. You can almost treat it as like an evergreen process. So that kind of like classification severity documentation, maybe in July, you review and update that. In February, you might go and you pick up your communication plan, review, look at that, update that. This gives you an evergreen thing, kind of way to approach this. A lot of times I've found that if you try to update a huge incident response plan or a lot of documentation all at once again, that's a lot of stuff to read. I'm just going to kind of quickly skim it, not really pay attention to the content, maybe change a thing here or there, but really and truly you're doing yourself a disservice. If you can break it up and actually spend the time throughout the year on it, you're really going to be in a much better place when the incident does come. And then, of course, part of the review and update process should be an incident response exercise. This could be a tabletop exercise. You can even do a live fire exercise where you get like a red team in and you actually test some of this capability. If you've got the incident response retainer, this is a great way to burn some of those hours as well. All right, we got another hand raised. Let's see.
But what do you think of cyber ranges?
What do I think of cyber ranges?
Yeah, or have you dealt with cyber ranges at all?
So I have not dealt with a cyber range, unfortunately, in like when it comes to testing incident response. IBM, has like the big one, and I have talked to some folks that are planning on doing that, and I should be involved with them when they test their incident response procedure. That'll be kind of here in like Q2 next year. So that'll be my first experience with that. Not having firsthand experience with it, but secondhand experience, like cyber ranges are pretty good. Kind of the downfall to like the cyber range, as opposed to like having a red team come in and do more of a purple team engagement type test, is that cyber ranges, a lot of times, they're not built exactly like your environment. The tooling and configuration is always exactly the same. A lot of these providers, like I said, IBM's the big one right now that's pumping like, the big like party bus that comes to your organization. You go inside. They do what they can, but I mean, it's still not going to be like a perfect kind of, real world fit. You reduce the likelihood or the chances of, taking down a production system that you would see with like a red team or purple team engagement. But it's also can give like a false sense of confidence, like, oh, I can do this tool and do it this way, and come to find out in your real incident response engagement, you don't have the same license with the same capability, or you've got something that's 4 versions behind what you used in the cyber range. So there are downfalls with it. I've not actually seen one. That's just, like I said, anecdotal, secondhand knowledge, but I am looking forward to getting into one of these cyber range incident response tests kind of next year.
Yeah, we have them at work, so that's why I asked what your experience was with them or what your thoughts were on them. So, it's funny you mentioned IBM. It's because they want to sell QRadar to you, right? That's to your point. I think you have a valid point, is that it's not going to be like your environment. So the tooling itself isn't going to be one-to-one, which is unfortunate, but like a lot of the times we're just trying to build that mindset, right? Because we've had like, hey, step 1, why don't you just like turn off this computer or unplug it, or block this IP, or do some of the basic stuff, which we're not seeing necessarily from the people, that it's like, yeah, this should be like your first step.
Yeah, it can totally help with that. It's just important to, like, I guess, understand where it would break down. I'm not saying there's no value and you shouldn't do it. Like, I'd much rather do kind of a cyber range over like a tabletop, especially if all I've ever done is tabletops, because it's very easy to kind of like ivory tower kind of, use my magic thought logic to get around like issues or not consider things.
Well, and we get feedback from the group too, right? So we get like, hey, your team did this compared to other teams we've dealt with, right? They did this well, they didn't do this well. And that's like, it's good to get some of that like human feedback from people that are seeing other groups going through the cyber range. So, but I'm also curious because to me, I've also been kind of hesitant with it as well, right? Is that, like you said, it's like, it's not one-to-one. Can it actually, train people to think more within like this incident response phase?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it has to do with, once again, kind of like the size of your organization, risk tolerance, how bleeding edge you want to be. There's plenty of organizations and the only thing they'll ever do is tabletop.
Right.
It is what it is. There's some organizations that might go that route, but there's other organizations, just due to the nature of their business or the impact, if you're doing kind of adversary emulation or a red team or a purple team engagement, they're just not going to want to do that, or they're going to scope it in a way where the most critical, those crown jewels, aren't going to be in scope. And so like you're not going to get that experience or really any kind of that instant response process there. An ideal world, probably you do a mixture of all three. Maybe like do one year, one another year, one a third, the third year. Maybe do like a tabletop every year, and then alternate between like either a red team, purple team adversary engagement, and like the kind of like a cyber range at the end of the year. So you essentially have a tabletop every year and then a live fire one each year. It really comes down to budget and risk tolerance and your organization.
Right. Yep.
All right, so congratulations. You've got your Prepper Mayor badge.
Woohoo!
You're a basic prepper. But you know what? A basic prepper is not Doomsday prepper. That's where we want to go, folks. Got to level it up. We want to go from surviving to thriving. All right, so what are Doomsday cyber events? And here's some good examples. It's not inclusive, but like ransomware, of course. Like, oh my gosh, my whole environment's down. Destructive worms, distributed denial service attacks. It's a little bit harder to null route things and block things. Insider threats, stealing trade secrets or treasured crown jewels. Really and truly, just about any kind of what we would consider resume generating event. Now, let me go ahead and like say this now before anyone like boos and shames me or anything like that. I'm not saying that you as a security personnel, if your company gets hurt with ransomware, you should be fired and casted out and like never find another job again. No, not what I'm saying at all. In fact, folks that go through these types of things, experience this stuff, they have invaluable experience. You really should try to keep them. You shouldn't let them go. But that being said, like I've unfortunately witnessed where a ransomware attack they weren't able to recover from did shut down and put a company out of business. That is resume generating event. We're talking about destructive attacks that could possibly shut down a company forever if not properly handled. When we say resume generating events, these are the Doomsday things, company killers, or things that can put like the company in the ICU on life support. So that being said, not a comprehensive list, but I think I've covered like the big threats. So things to keep in mind when dealing with Doomsday events: do not panic or react without a plan. We were talking about IR plan, things you need to have in place. Listen, most mistakes in an IR are made because someone just panics or reacts and just does something. I literally, like back beginning of the summer, worked in IR. We got called in. They were like, yeah, we got ransomware. We want to find out how they got in. We started talking to them and asked to start pulling data. They didn't even think about like, oh my gosh, we actually need like forensic artifacts to do an investigation. They wiped all the servers. They're just like, yeah, we got backups. We wiped everything, but we don't know how they got in. We guys want you to do an investigation. It's like, well, I don't have any evidence really to do anything, give you that root cause, because you didn't really think about like the repercussions. Like I understand you had to get business back up, but really and truly it's going to happen again. Now, luckily we were able to piece together like some logs and a lot of like theorizing and whatnot. We were actually able to come to like the probable root cause, patch that up, and I moved on to greener pastures, but I don't think they've been breached again. So really and truly, it's important to kind of think things through, to rely on that plan, not to let emotion get a hold of you. Lean on the IR plan, lean on your insurance, lean on those breach coach, lean on that external DFIR firm to guide you. If you don't feel like you can do that, or you don't have a mature or good enough plan in place, remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That doesn't mean to move as slow as possible, but take your time. Make things smooth. Don't make mistakes. Mistakes cost quite a bit in time and resources in incident response scenarios. Do not cast blame. Listen, emotions are high. If you go and you blame the networking group, they would just listen to me and put this firewall rule in on this zone. This would never happen. Listen, that creates toxicity. That toxicity makes people not want to cooperate. It leads to mistakes. Everything just goes south. I literally worked an incident one time where before I even got on site, before they even called the company I worked for, folks started casting blame. When I showed up, the whole IT department, except for 2 people, had put in their notice and quit. I had to have a conversation with the CIO. He had a conversation with them because there's no way I can recover an organization with just 2 people. One guy had only been there. One guy had only been there 2 weeks. But the CIO had to reach out, talk to these people, sing kumbaya. It took 2 hours. And eventually he got all of them back except for one person. And they all kind of rescinded their notice. But that kind of stuff can kill you. You lose your whole IT team because they're blaming each other and stuff like that. And they get sick of each other and they just quit on the middle of an incident. It's crazy. And that's not even the first time I've seen that. I've seen people quit on incidents multiple times because they feel like they are being blamed or someone has blamed them. Is important to make clear at the beginning of the incident that you're not trying to blame anyone. You're just trying to get the business back up and running, and it's not anyone's fault. In fact, it's a shared responsibility. Other big thing, set realistic expectations and a work schedule. A lot of people, an incident will happen, and they'll just do this stuff where they'll work 20-hour days, 4 days in a row. Listen, incidents are not a sprint. It's a journey. It's a marathon. You're not going to get it up in 2 days or 3 days. I've seen some Herculean efforts. I've seen people do it before. It's not healthy, especially with all the stress that you're going under. It's just not going to work. If you have to have round the clock support, getting things back up, whoever the handler is or whoever's kind of running the engagement, go and set up a work schedule. Have a certain amount of your resources working between these hours. Have them clock off. Make sure they clean. Go home, take a shower, get clean. Make sure they eat. Have another shift, work in shifts. That's how you do it. You don't have you don't have as much manpower trying to do stuff, but you can work around the clock on things. And that's what you have to think about. Pretty much the long-term effects and outcome, because you're just not going to get back up and running and recovered that quickly. Also, whenever you're doing that, once again, on the objectives, you got to set kind of reasonable, short-term and long-term objectives. This is especially important if you're going into and using a third-party DFIR firm, because once again, some of these firms are kind of run-of-the-mill. This industry is hot right now. A lot of folks can't hire enough people, so there's a lot of junior folks out there. They can't even give you guidance. Make sure that you as a business understand what you want. Do you want to understand root cause? Do you want to understand this? What are your objectives for each party? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve, a understanding of how they got in? And is that your number one priority, or is your number one priority trying to get the business back up and running? It's important to know. All right, so moving on to Doomsday, and this is going to help you build out kind of that incident response plan a little bit better. Number one thing, first step I have is triage. So the purpose of triaging is just determining the impact and the potential of the potential incident. We call it potential because we don't know it's an incident yet. We have to kind of, evaluate that and investigate that. Now, some people might pull some issue here because, step number 2 is going to be investigate. Brandon, why should I go and why should I triage before I investigate? Multiple reasons. First of all, really and truly, they're going to kind of be done hand in hand. But if you have multiple incidents going on or potential incidents, if you have some really pressing other work, being able to quickly classify it and just getting the bare data that you need to quickly triage that and understand the impact really kind of helps prioritize whether or not you need to just take this incident and start investigating and confirm it's a true incident, or if you need to set it aside and maybe look at another potential incident, or maybe set it aside and knock out some stuff that's critical for the business to take care of because there's a new product line launching. Might be a little bit unfavorable, but it is what it is. Triaging oftentimes I find to be kind of like the first step or the most beneficial step. And then going on, where does this fit in? That severity and classification guide is where this should fit in. Some of the things I know Adam brought it up earlier. Some of the things you need to be looking at is this ideally to have kind of a matrix looking at multiple aspects to help kind of determine the triage and the impact of that. Things you can look at is like the asset classification, the number of assets affected, the data classification of the asset, the type of loss, like is actually going to be like a reputational damage, or are we talking about like actual like systems down revenue damage? Business units impacted. Certain business units might be a little bit more important than other business units. These are just some different things to kind of think about. There's like a million different things to kind of like take into account here. You could take as many or as few of them as you want. The more of them that you take into effect, the more important that matrix thing is. But that matrix for kind of determining this should be in that severity and classification guide. And that's where you want to build this kind of thought process out. All right, moving on to kind of the investigation and collection. Like I said, they're kind of done hand in hand. I kind of like just doing enough investigation just to get that triage done and then kind of set it aside and then kind of figure out what you want to do. But really and truly, you're going to do them hand in hand. So investigation, evidence collection. Well, of course, to investigate something, you have to collect the evidence, right? Really and truly, this is where playbooks come into place. So this here is, you kind of have to go and you have to know what information to collect and determine if the event's like a true incident or, an adverse security incident or a false positive. That playbook's kind of line that up. That playbook's going to be kind of lined up with, you're saying it's ransomware. This is how we validate a ransomware and determine it's true positive versus, a Trojan versus insider threat. Your playbooks are kind of line that out, tell you how to investigate and different things to kind of look at. And then you're going to have SOPs for how to collect the type of data that your playbook's telling you to look at. Some of this step or, in some organizations, a lot of this is kind of outsourced to, a third-party MSSP SOC, in which case they're doing a lot of this stuff. But even when you get their alert, you still have to do some level of validation. So these playbooks and these SOPs are still important. Now, once again, you're pulling data. Now, if you're pulling data from the asset in question, you need to do so in a manner that is approved and forensically sound. Ideally, you have a SIM, you got logs for it, and you just go to your SIM, you do all your stuff there, you never touch the asset. A lot of folks don't have SIMs for some reason, or don't have centralized logging, or they only log servers and they don't log workstations, or any of these things. So if you have to pull data and you don't have don't have the data where you can access it without touching the thing, you need to make sure that you do it in a way that is forensically sound, so you're not damaging information. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do anything. That's why you have that whole retainer. Call your provider. Let them do this for you. If you are going to pull evidence, pull it in the order of volatility. We talked about automation earlier. If you can go and you can use automated tools or automated scripts for this collection of data, that is the way to do it. In fact, a lot of folks, if you have a paid retainer, I know Verizon's famous for this. As part of their retainer, they actually give you a collection script. You have an incident, or you think you have an incident, you go to the machine, you run the script, it collects the stuff for us, call us, give it to us, and that's pulling pretty much like the memory dump, all these other artifacts for you. It's pulling all this stuff, and they teach you how to use it and whatnot. And they don't have to worry about you shutting down the machine and losing RAM. You don't have to worry about you doing anything dumb. But once again, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it at all. The other thing is that, whenever you're doing the investigation, you really have like some minimal stuff that should be documented. So if you have no other capability, really and truly what's helpful for that third party that you're going to bring in is going to be what observation led you to the suspicion that a compromise happened. Why is there an incident? And whether or not there are any changes in the configurations of the system, network, or data. So look at your change control process. Any changes happen. Anything that can be used to kind of deconflict whatever you see. All really important stuff. Any other questions, I guess, before we go on? All right, hearing none. This all should be documented, kind of that evidence handling and investigation documentation. Like I said, this is where your playbooks live. So sidebar. So the whole time you're doing this, you should be taking notes. Notes are a godsend. If you're not taking notes, listen, something's wrong. You can take notes kind of however you want. You can take them in a handwritten format, or you can take them in a digital format. There are some people out there, you know, if you've been to the doctor here in probably the last 5 years, they've got the little fancy kind of like recorder. They walk out of the room, you think they're crazy because they're talking to themselves into the little recorder. They pretty much pull the MP3 off, throw in some transcription stuff, transcribes all the stuff. Listen, I do that when I go on incident response engagement. There's other folks out there. You can even do that. That being said, I prefer handwritten notes or that digital recorder, something off the network, because if they're digital notes and you get hit with ransomware because the ransomware is spreading, you don't have your notes anymore. If they're digital notes and you don't eradicate the threat actor and don't properly contain it, they're going to get your digital notes and know that you're onto them. Change their behavior a little bit. Not good things. So my preference is usually handwritten notes, or like I said, that digital recorder, so something not touching the network. But you know, to each their own. You gotta kind of weigh what works best for you and your organization. Listen, your notes should always include, once again, those 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and that 1 H of how with everything you do. You should also include timestamps. Should be very detailed. It's also important to note that if a lawsuit or some legal matter comes out of that, your notes are discoverable. If you do have to go and give like a deposition or testify, you can use your notes. This is especially like useful if something somehow or another turns into like a kind of like civil legal matter. The lawyer will go and try to attack you. You can reference your notes. It will keep you from making mistakes. Last thing is, if you're going too fast to take notes, then you're going too fast, period. Once again, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Take notes. All right. See, we got a hand raised, it looks like.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do when we talk about like vulnerabilities and other stuff, right? It's not necessarily incident response stuff, but one of and I just want your take in general, right? Because what I was told by my leadership that we should put in our, or like as like at the bottom, right? This communication and data contained in are confidential or privileged, and it's specifically for that kind of stuff that becomes discoverable by like legal or other stuff that you were just talking about.
So this is where I'm going to say that I'm not a lawyer. I've never played one on TV. I wish I was one or the other, because I would have a lot more money. That being said, like legal stuff is kind of weird. So I know, you know, Mandiant was in the news, I guess 2 years ago with who was the firm? Pretty much a firm was breached, and then the Mandiant report was actually discoverable, even though it was confidential and all this other stuff. And it was because Mandiant was on a retainer, and the retainer wasn't through a law firm. Adam, did you post a link to it? Is that why you're thumbs upping? Okay. I'll look it up and I'll post it in like the Slack group later, but you can do kind of like a search. But ideally, the report from the incident that Mandiant was working on with this company, and it eludes me who it was. Like I said, it was 2 years ago. Shouldn't have been discoverable, but it was something, I don't know, some kind of legal proceeding that made it discoverable. So that being said, just because you put confidential on there, or you know, something in the subject line of the email, you know, maybe it makes it discoverable, but there are all these kind of edge cases, these ways around this stuff. I don't know. I really can't speak to that.
Yeah, it's something that internally, like with a lot of vulnerability stuff, like I keep getting hounded by my leadership to add, to the point that I've just added it to my signature.
Yeah, I mean,
point, right? And so it's been about like 2 years ago, because I think like my CISO or somebody went to a conference and was like, we need to start doing this with our stuff to avoid exactly what you're talking about, right? Which is where notes were discoverable that can be used against you in some legal or other manner.
Yeah, the whole process, like I said, because I'm not a lawyer, I don't really understand it, and it's all kind of mumbo jumbo and like voodoo magic to me.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
So, I mean, I would say that if your internal general counsel told you to do that, like defer to them. They're a lot more knowledgeable in this. And Capital One, thank you, Ryan. It was Capital One.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just defer to them, and you know, go that route. I mean, I don't think it would hurt. So I mean,
Well,
yeah,
and that's the thing is that, to me, it doesn't really hurt, right? It's just copying. And at this point, I was like giving crap about it the other day. Like, you need to have this in your communication with an email. It's just email too, right? And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to add it to my signature, so all of my communications have that, right? And it's an easy, automated way for me not to have to worry about, does this email need it or does this email need it? You know, it's just like it's in there, and so that's why, yeah, it's. I don't know. It's goes back to like your original point, right? Is that people are going to use, like lawyers and other people and general counsel are going to use it in some sort of way. And I've never had like general counsel come to me and say that, but my leadership has. And you know, if your leader says, like you said, like leadership buy-in and stuff, your leadership says do it, go do it.
Yeah, and this is another reason that I think that it's really important, especially if you're not an expert in this and you're not to the maturity level. If you're building out an incident response plan, it is very worthwhile to pay the money to bring in a third-party provider and a third-party like general counsel that specializes in like privacy and digital law, because they're going to be able to guide you and kind of tell you to add certain things or include certain things you otherwise wouldn't know. And kind of to your point, maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't help, but you know what? If it doesn't help and you don't know, and then your notes are discoverable and you didn't need them to be discoverable, and now you're dealing with like this whole PR nightmare, that's something that, maybe like $2,000, like a year or two earlier, if you would have just paid a law firm to kind of give their opinion and input, could have saved you, $200,000 in headache. So,
right. Well, and I think like I love that your advice is go talk to your general counsel, because I'm going to go back to my boss and be like, is legal telling me this, or are you guys just telling me this because you went to like some sort of webinar?
Yeah, I would say that, like, definitely, because like I would imagine that there's also some pitfalls to doing that as well. Having worked with lawyers before with incident response scenarios, there are certain things they want to be discoverable. So if someone comes back and sues, it's there and it's discoverable, and it can kind of shut down lawsuits before they ever,
Right.
it's a game to them. It's a double-edged sword.
Right.
So, I mean, in some cases, it's actually beneficial to have things discoverable, which I'd never even thought about before until like a year and a half ago. And I was working with a large third party like breach coach, and they were actually talking about like how you can do these things. It's kind of like accountants. You get an accountant, a good CPA, and you're running your business. They can definitely help you like move money around and get creative with your tax write-offs. A good like breach lawyer can do the same thing. Like, we want to make this discoverable because it's actually going to offer or provide like a CYA. So general counsel, if you have any kind of legal questions, that's who you need to go talk to. Period, point blank. All right, moving on. So you notice this here is going to be like step 3A in becoming kind of like this doomsday prepper, and some of the things you need to kind of think about and work on including. So 3A, that means this is going to be done in parallel with some other tasks. So you got to declare an incident. So the first step is to have the correct individual declare an incident. Well, what do you mean, Brandon? The correct individual? I'm the incident responder. Do I declare the incident? No. Going back, certain regulatory requirements, have certain impact. You don't necessarily want your junior guy who's, on call for the first time investigating stuff being the one to like declare an incident, because if he misdeclares an incident, it could be pretty costly and disrupt business impact. So a lot of folks, what they'll do is they'll actually tie kind of, who can declare an incident or who actually can call it an incident based off that initial triage. So if it's triage kind of like a low impact, low severity thing, your junior guy can declare an incident all day, every day. If it gets that critical, like, oh my gosh, we're completely and totally ransomware, we're going to go out of business, terrible stuff, power plants on fire, spewing acid, looks like a hellscape outside your window. Yeah, you probably don't want to have like a junior guy necessarily like calling that, unless it really looks like a hellscape and he kind of understands OT networks. You might want to kick that over to someone a little higher up the food chain to actually declare that incident because of the possible impact. Your second step is going to be like communicate the incident to the necessary stakeholders. If it affects just a certain business unit, you're probably going to let them know. You also need to let your IR team know. Got to let them know there's an incident so we can kind of engage and get the ball rolling. Your third thing is, you probably want to start contacting cyber insurance, your IR firms on retainers, legal counsel if needed. How do you know if they're needed? Once again, you can kind of tie that back to some of the things we talked about earlier. Here's kind of how this lines up with your incident response plan. Having the correct individual declare an incident, look at your RACI. Your RACI should kind of like line that out. Who's responsible and accountable for declaring an incident? You can have it line item based off, that severity and classification guide. That's step number 2. That's going to be kind of your communication guide. How do I communicate and what information do I relay whenever I declare an incident? Also, how do I contact them? Who my points of contacts are for this role? That's going to be in your resources and point of contact. It's also going to hold true for number 3. You're going to use that severity and classification guide more than likely to determine, once again, if it's an AV alert, I'm not going to want to go and, reach out to mandate over an AV alert. I could probably handle something the AV flagged on or remediated myself. That's going to be probably a low severity incident. But, being able to determine at what point in time you call in these third parties or call in your cyber insurance, that's going to be kind of classified more than likely in that part of your incident response plan or library. And then once again, knowing how to contact them, who to contact, all the data they need, stuff like that, that's going to be in that resources and point of contact. All right, 3B, set up the first communication. Listen, you got an incident, you got to talk to people. So let's talk about that. That first communication should include all stakeholders and IR team members and anyone else who's really kind of pertinent. So if legal counsel, because of like the nature of the data needs to be on there, throw legal counsel on there. Kind of common sense stuff. Your kind of IR plan should kind of lay some of this out. One individual needs to lead the meeting. This is a huge drawback that I see in a lot of incident response kind of engagements. You have an IR and people fight on who should lead the meeting. You got like the handler's boss is fighting and wants to lead the meeting, take another direction. You got the handler. You got some guy who's been in the company forever that's like a sysadmin wanting to kind of like run the meeting. Listen, there's one person that runs the meeting. They hold the floor, follow Robert's rules of order, let them kind of dictate the meeting, kind of drive the meeting forward. That's the point person. All right. Should be in your RACI chart. Doesn't necessarily have to be like the handler. It doesn't have to be the person who first made aware of the incident. A lot of times it is because they do have the most knowledge. It can be whoever you want, whatever makes sense for your business, but have one person kind of lead these meetings. When you have the meeting, it's good for it to kind of follow like a standard flow. That standard flow down here in this little gray block on the lower right-hand side. This is why I find works most of the time and everyone's kind of happy with. You get on the meeting, the first thing you do is you ask for someone to be a scribe. You got to have your note taker because you're running the meeting. You're doing a lot of talking. You're not going to take good notes. Dedicate someone to take the notes for you. Do your roll call. Do you have all your IR team out there? Do you have someone from the networking team there? Do you have someone from the sysadmin team there? Do you have representation from legal counsel? Do you have representation from your third-party IR provider if you've engaged them? Who do we have everyone we need to make this successful? If not, you need to notate that, get someone else on the call to reach out and try to pull them in. Go back to that point of contact list, see who their secondary backup is. Get someone on there that's a representative of that business unit or that team on the call. Then you're going to start out summarizing kind of the incident and the current objectives, what's changed, anything like that since the last meeting. Because of the first meeting, it's just going to be a summary of the incident. Then what you're going to do is you're going to do kind of like a round table. Each team member or team that's a part of the, I guess you could say IR team, because sometimes you have to pull in the whole networking team or a couple members of that. One person is going to give a status update, what new findings they have on action items as they've been assigned, or what they've kind of done according to the RACI. Once everyone's kind of give their status updates and findings, you're going to talk about next steps, discussion of the current objectives, how they should change. Once you kind of have that and you kind of have, reorient where you want to go from there, you're going to kind of review the action items. So-and-so is going to do this. So-and-so is going to do this. So-and-so is going to do this. So the action items and their assignments. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to set the next meeting or any future cadence. So maybe you want to meet twice a day at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Maybe you want to have like an emergency meeting. You're going to let people know you're going to schedule that. You're going to follow that up. in some other communication after, especially with those action items and assignments, because I can verbally tell you something, especially in one of these high stress like situations, I can acknowledge it, 2 minutes later because of the stress, completely and totally forget it. So it's a good idea to kind of like write it down in some written form of communication and get it to that person. Another important note, your communication may need to be out of band. Why is this important? Anyone want to venture a guess?
Same thing as the putting your notes on the network.
Yeah, for one. Really, that's kind of like the key thing. So there's been a lot of stuff over the years. I've talked to a lot of folks, but I talked to some folks that originally responded to the Saudi Aramco stuff way back when they had like the nasty destruction of their network. Some responders have said that the Exchange server was compromised and Saudi Aramco was kind of on to them, and an email was sent, something about cleaning up an infection. That's when all the machines started getting wiped. The adversary was in Exchange, saw that, and then decided to start wiping tracks. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of disputed there. A lot of stuff that incident's not public knowledge. It's just hearsay from other folks that have been tangentially related to that. But, it's kind of interesting. Probably a more practical, I guess, thing that I have experience with is I worked earlier in the year in incident response engagement with ransomware. This organization reached out to us and said, "Hey, we got hit with ransomware, but we think we've got it taken care of, but we just want to get another set of eyes on it." It's like, what do you mean you thought you took care of it? And they're like, it was only on one server. We wiped it, took care of it. It was good. We're like, all right, so this is data we need. We need this access. It was, of course, like 5 p.m. on a Friday that they called. And they're like, we'll handle it Monday. Like, we got it taken care of. We feel confident in it. I get a phone call like 8 o'clock Saturday morning. So we need you guys like on site now. I was like, what's going on? Well, come to find out that they had they stopped the ransomware from executing encrypting stuff. But the whole thing with ransomware, because people have gotten better with backups, now they exfiltrate the data and they post the data. And this firm had done something ridiculous, like released a public kind of like announcement saying that they had been attacked and they were successfully repelled the attack. And they stopped the encryption, but they didn't stop like the 300 gigs of data leaving their network. And the adversary was still in there with a compromised user and saw this and emailed the whole company distro list telling them that how like they thought that was a slap in the face, and attached the W-2 information of the CEO, CTO, CIO, and COO with social security, financial information, emailed it to the whole distro list. The adversary was still in there and had multiple compromised user accounts. So, just imagine if one of those would have been a sysadmin or someone who could read other mailboxes. I mean, this stuff can go south really quick. So it is a good idea to have like out of bounds communication. Discuss this, figure this out, what you're going to do.
That press release couldn't have waited like a week. Like, really?
Yeah. Well, that was the whole reason we got called in, is because like all this data for the C-level work, the C-level folks got like exposed. But I mean, the whole thing is a good idea to go ahead and plan for out of band communications. Have that out of band communications documented in your incident response plan. And then have it.
What does that look like? Like, what does that look like? Like, to me, is that like WeChat? Is like, what does that look like? Is that Signal?
Yeah, so a lot of folks will utilize Signal. That's really popular as Signal, and then kind of using that communication tree, and then just doing like Signal, pretty much big Signal like group text. I've seen some people go as far as everyone's gonna go and sign up for like a Gmail address with this certain kind of like, I guess
is this
username, and we'll do email through like Gmail because it's not touching a company asset. I've seen like folks do things where they have like a Slack. They went ahead and they set up a Slack. Everyone has accounts. The Slack accounts aren't tied to like your corporate email addresses. Like they ask you to use like a throwaway email address or a personal email address, and then it's up to you to kind of keep track of how to log into the Slack. And that Slack is just
a lot of work. God.
I was gonna say that the entire company's incident response is down because nobody can remember their alternate email.
Yeah,
I think I've used like every different one of those too, like depending on the engagement. Like I've had all of those out of band ones.
Yeah, and really and
Discord.
truly, it's just
Discord's
going to
a new
depend
one,
on what
right?
the company is kind of comfortable with and what they want to use. You know, it is what it is. That being said, like I've seen some people, it's not notated anywhere in here, but if you're super paranoid, I've seen some companies like they don't even have like a digital copy of their incident response plan because they don't want it to be on the network and an adversary pick it up and see their stuff.
Yeah.
So they'll actually go through and have like a printed out physical copy. It'll only exist the incident response plan, and in the incident response plan they'll have like out of band communications. I've seen folks be assigned like special cell phones that you get out of like a locker essentially whenever there's an incident response, and you distribute it to the team that's not tied to the company. I mean, whatever works for you. What it boils down to.
No. Yeah. So I'm glad you clarified that because I was curious about that.
Yeah. So going back, where all this stuff's going to kind of fit in on the grand scheme of things, the individual leading the meeting, racy. As far as kind of like how to run the calls and the flow of that and kind of your out of band communication, all that stuff to think about to add to that communication guide. As far as like who to include on like that initial communication, who needs to be a part of that, that's going to probably, depend on that severity and classification guide. You might have some reference to who to include and whatnot. As well as like that resources and point of contact. That's going to tell you exactly who to reach out to for different roles and whatnot. 3C, peer notification. So this is an interesting one. This is one that's not going to be necessarily applicable to everyone. What is a peer organization? A peer organization really kind of, you consider that a parent company. So let's say like you're owned by a holding company. It could be like a business partner that you have some kind of an agreement with. So if you do have like an incident, you're required to report it to them. This is why like the definitions of incidents are like really kind of odd today, because like you do have like these legal agreements with business partners and you might have to tell them about your incident and share certain details. So you want to be very specific about how you define an incident, because you don't want to like share this information. You want to kind of keep it need to know. Organizations with a shared presence in the environment. Key example of this is if you're in manufacturing and you actually build a good and you ship it to a warehouse. A lot of these manufacturing organizations, they're lean and mean. They don't like to have like a lot of overhead. So they won't actually own the warehouse. They'll have a third party that owns and runs a warehouse for them, but they need some kind of shared presence into their environment in order to get a hold of certain types of data to know when shipments are going in and out and whatnot. Law enforcement, you can consider a peer organization. When do I contact law enforcement? Regulatory bodies. If you have certain regulatory requirements, they would be a peer organization you may have to notify because you've lost PHI or PII. We start talking about like NERC SIP, is it pretty much like a bulk capacity like system? These types of stuff are things sometimes you have to report. These are your peer organizations. When you go and you talk to these peer organizations, what you share, how often you share, that probably should be like a separate part of your incident response library that we didn't really talk about. So you can add this as a plan to your library, or a part of your library in your incident response plan, like peer notification, when you reach out to people and what circumstances, what you communicate. Whenever you get into these situations, legal counsel is your best friend. Let them give you guidance and input. The whole reason peer notification exists is because of like general counsel and legal guidelines to begin with. Always include them. Even if the peer notification very clearly says you should do X, Y, Z, consult general counsel, because the laws may have changed and your documentation is not updated. Maybe you don't have to report something. Maybe you need to report something additional. 3D. We were getting to this. Got to contain the incident, man. I've declared an incident. I've contacted people. I haven't done anything to stop it from spreading. This is why all this stuff is kind of like, 3A, B, C, D. You're supposed to be doing all this stuff in tangent, parallel. Containment, we want to minimize the impact to our business systems. We don't want something crazy. We don't want ransomware everywhere, or at least I don't want ransomware everywhere. You might want ransomware all over your environment. PS Exec's a cool tool. You might just let them throw it wherever. I don't. Really, the kind of way to think about containment is there's two types of containment. Most folks aren't going to tell you this, but there's a short-term containment and a long-term containment. Short-term containment is usually that initial knee-jerk reaction, like, oh my God, ransomware, unplug the internet. Because I know ransomware is human operated, and if I just kill all connections to the internet, they probably can't really push it anywhere else unless they've already kicked off the script to deploy it. And if they have, maybe I isolate that system if I can identify the beachhead or something with a bunch of SMB traffic. Just knee-jerk, just shut things down, stop things. You can't really kind of operate that. And then, as you kind of get more information and you actually continue the investigation, you probably figure out that, hey, I can actually bring up maybe part of the business. Maybe that knee-jerk reaction was just a tad too much. But, we have to kind of weigh out our risk and our impact there. So, at the time it was good enough, but now I need to get things back on right line. I need to try to get things kind of rolling again. This is where that long-term kind of containment. I'm not really remediating everything, but maybe I can plug the internet back in and block a handful of IPs and domains because I found out that's the C2 communication. Maybe I can disable this a user account that's been compromised and I can re-enable. This long-term containment takes a little bit more time. It requires a little bit more investigation. You're not remediating it, but allows you to kind of get a little closer to steady state and, still keep things kind of rocking and rolling and things, in place in a state that, is acceptable until you can kind of really get your hands and mind grasp around what's going on. Where's this going to be documented? So this is going to be documented under what I call response capabilities. Let's take a minute to talk about response capabilities. So if you go and you Google like response capabilities and instant response and stuff like that, there's not going to be anything out there. I'm not going to say this is like unique and like some great Brandon thought because I don't think it is, but I haven't really heard a whole lot of people talk about this. And this is kind of the way I approach incident response. And I find this to be very beneficial. And I really think everyone should kind of include this in their incident response kind of library. So the best way to think about incident response is it's like a strategy game. All right. You have an adversary that kind of picks like their capability, type of incident, what they're trying to achieve, their goals and objectives. You might know some of it. You might not know all of it. You're also constrained to your environment. You don't really get to pick your environment. You might not be able to do certain things. You might, be in a Linux environment, a Windows environment, mixed environment, cloud environment. Those kind of constraints dictate what you can do. So think of this kind of like a Magic the Gathering card game or any other strategy game. I have certain response capabilities. So I can see what an adversary is doing. I know what they've done. I know the constraints of my environment. And given that, I have the ability to play certain response, quote unquote, capabilities. What we do is we kind of map these capabilities to different phases. So I've got containment capabilities. I've got eradication capabilities. If you have an in-house SOC, you can even say you have like certain investigation capabilities, but we're going to kind of push that aside because it's slightly out of scope. And what these capabilities do is say, okay, I have a containment capability. And if I have a certain artifact that I know is malicious, like a hash, I can take a certain action on that. So an example of this is I can block a hash from executing. Functionality in every EDR product out there, right? So containment, I've got some nasty little like worm out there. Maybe my containment capability I want to use because I have the hash of it. So I want to block the hash from executing. I haven't tied this to any tool or anything like that. But in that response capability document, I'm in my containment phase. The thing I'm trying to do something with is a hash. I have an SOP on how to do that in my EDR tool. So if you're using Windows Defender, this is how you do it. So this is where it gets interesting because this is where it becomes like a strategy game. Well, Brandon, I'm in manufacturing. I got an OT network. I'm running Windows XP. Defender for Endpoint doesn't work on XP. What am I going to do? Well, you're not out of luck. If I have a file name, maybe I can do something with the file name because there's this group policy thing called software restriction policy. Maybe I can go and do a software restriction policy for something named a certain way and block the execution that way. Now that's using like a slightly different artifact. Well, let's say that I've got some botched, like really crappy, like EDR that's not EDR. They say they're an EDR, but I can't block a hash, or I'm too poor to afford an EDR. Well, remember, blocking by hash in the containment phase is a capability. It's not necessarily reliant on a tool. I can also have multiple tools that do the same thing. What happens is if the adversary is like, oh, let's just say it's HX, because I think a lot of people here work for the state. They're familiar with HX. It's a local server. Let's say you got FireEye HX, and that's your quote unquote EER. It's a local server. Adversary compromises that HX server, takes that HX server down. HX isn't functioning. How am I going to block the hash? Oh my gosh. Guess what? If you got like Windows Vista Enterprise or higher, Microsoft has this thing called App Locker. Guess what App Locker can do? Block execution based off of file hash. Agnostic of the technology, the capability is still there. We run into these problems on IRs all the time, especially if you do them over and over and over again. You have to get creative about things. I literally worked an incident one time before. We came up with like a IP address and a domain, and it's like, listen, like, what are you using for your firewall, and what are you using for like your web proxy? Let's go and block the stuff in the web proxy and the firewall. And this organization was really small. They didn't have like an IT person. It was like someone who was like good with VCRs back in the day, and they were like their IT person. They weren't a true IT person. And they're like, oh, we had a consultant come in one time, and we had some kind of like business application. He was having a problem with it. He told us to get rid of the firewall. I was like, what do you mean get rid of the firewall? They're like, wait, we threw it away. I was like, so how you connect to the internet? And they're like, the internet company gave us that little blue blinky box, and we just plug everything in that. They were literally plugging things straight into the ISP switch.
Oh god,
that was how they were connecting to the internet. Absolutely crazy.
Like, I've lost count of how many times that's happened. Actually, that is times.
Yeah, it blows
with
your mind.
nonprofits and stuff like that.
Yeah, it blows your mind. It's like how am I gonna block an IP address if I don't have a firewall? How am I gonna block a domain if I don't have a firewall? Anyone want to venture a guess?
I can't get over all your references to XP and VCRs.
Anyone want to venture a guess? If I don't have a firewall or a web proxy, how am I going to block like a domain or an IP address? We got to think creative here, man. It's a strategy game.
HX isn't an EDR either, so good luck with it.
Whatever. We moved on past it. We're talking about IPs and domains. If I don't have a firewall, how am I going to block it?
I got to make a potion.
What was Adam?
Sinkhole.
Sinkhole. Boom. Look at that. Adam. 50 points, man. 50 points there. You can sinkhole. You can use the local host file.
It's always DNS.
Yeah, you can go and create like a DNS zone, and if your DNS, if you're using Windows DNS, it doesn't support RPZ. But you can create a zone and you can sinkhole it there if it's a domain. If it's an IP address, have like a network-based firewall. Do you have a host-based firewall? Yeah, I mean, you can manage that through like group policy, or you have like Semantic, which has it bundled in. It's at least got a centralized console. You've got to be able to think creatively about things as you work through. You're not going to sit down and be able to document all these capabilities out like to begin with, but as you work through incident response, as you bring in, especially if you bring in like third-party incident response engagements and they're responders, and they're able to think kind of like critically about this and think of these workarounds, you can document these workarounds. And then along with kind of like mapping these to a containment, eradication, and to these different artifact types, you can also document the assumptions and requirements. Maybe in order to block a hash requires a certain user privilege, or, that you don't have. So now that becomes a starting point to say, hey, me as an incident responder, I need this privilege. I need to be able to log into a switch and kill a switch port. Your networking team might not like that. You probably are going to have to, work out some agreement with them if you need to do that and say, hey, I'll let you know first, or you'll share like a generic username and password and like a PAM for me, or, you can work this out, or you're going to give me a list of like 6 people that have access to this and that I can talk to them. And then I've got like the SOP on how to actually do that. So like I said, I don't think this is anything new, but I don't think organizations have stuff documented this way. And I think this makes it, once again, making that very human-centric. If I know that I'm in a certain phase, I need to take a certain action, and I have a certain artifact that I know is malicious or associated with maliciousness, being able to say, hey, I need to disable a username or block a domain, and then have a couple different ways I can do that based off, if my firewall's down or something like that. Having that in place is like godsend. Like, no one has it, and the few places that have helped people start doing this stuff, usually when another third-party provider comes in or consultant or someone else sees this, they like drool over this stuff. So I think this is kind of the future. Like I said, it's not really documented. Yes, I see the comments about nobody would read it. The idea is to make the documentation small, modular enough that people do read it, though, and to have it there. But anyways, step 4, we got it contained. Now we need to eradicate. Listen, eradication steps, once again, going to that response capability, you got a couple of different ways to kind of eradicate that. Remove files, reimage machines. Reimage machines, honestly, is the way that most people work. Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong if you try to hand clean stuff, if your investigation missed stuff. It's not necessarily good. So, everyone's kind of like true and tried method is just to wipe the machine and rebuild. That's where like a disaster recovery business continuity plan comes in real handy. A lot of kind of what you do also, you may need to consider backups in general. A lot of times I have seen incident response engagements where they have automatic backups going, and depending on the retention policy, if they forgot to disable it, now they have no good backups. The only backups they have are backups with malware. So if you caught that to begin with, maybe you disabled it, but now now that you've kind of eradicated that and recovered that, maybe you need to re-enable it. Maybe you have enough backups that you're fine. You have a good backup, but you need to purge the backups from the time that the incident occurred, so you don't accidentally restore them at some future date. These are all things to kind of think about and also document in your incident response plan. Depending on, the incident and the evidence and how you handled the evidence, the root cause may or may not be available. It's in the ideal world, you always get that root cause analysis, and then part of that root cause analysis and is to identify the factors that also contribute to the incident and to actually go through and address and mitigate all that stuff, so the incident ideally won't happen again, or you won't reinfect yourself. If you don't understand the root cause, you don't patch that root cause, there's a high likelihood of you being hit again, especially if it's ransomware. Maybe not the same strain, maybe not the same group, but they share a lot of TTPs and they do a lot of the same stuff. So it's just a matter of time. That being said, one important thing to note that I haven't noted yet, going back to evidence handling and incident response, please, if a SOC or a person tells you that they believe an incident has happened on something, do not go and install an antivirus tool and then run that. Antivirus is extremely destructive, especially if it finds stuff on deleting evidence and removing evidence. And it makes it very hard to determine root cause. Not impossible, just hard. It can make it a lot longer to do, because a lot of antivirus products, whenever they quarantine something, they move it to a different folder, they rename it, and they do a special XOR key to make it completely, totally non-executable. Having to figure out that XOR key is kind of hard, because it's not like that stuff is necessarily like commonly documented anywhere. Yes, I could go carve it right back off like the file disk and stuff like that if I'm doing dead disk forensics, but that's super expensive and super like time intensive, and you're going to pay for that. That's going to be really expensive. And if getting the business back online and your management is not okay with getting it back on so you understand that root cause, and you have something there and antivirus destroyed part of that evidence and you can't figure that out, that's going to be like, pretty bad. So once again, document what is acceptable as far as evidence handling, what is acceptable for you to do if there's a potential incident. If you don't have the expertise in that, once again, go talk to one of these third-party providers. Yes, they cost money. Everything worthwhile in life seems to cost money, but it's going to cost you like a lot less money to do that now up front than in an incident. It increases by multiple orders of magnitude.
So
where's all the stuff going to be documented? Disaster recovery business continuity plan, ideally, which is part of your incident response library. I think there's a comment, but I cut someone off.
No, keep going.
All right, wrapping it up. Last thing, we kind of sealed how they got in, handled the root cause, got it through containment, out of the incident. We think we're pretty good. How do we close it off? Hot wash, lessons learned. This is like the one thing every organization seems to be terrible with, to be honest. Listen, your hot wash lessons learned meeting should really be like the last meeting you have with the stakeholders and IR team. Kind of the agenda really should look like a SWOT analysis. Like we're talking about the strengths that we had during the incident, weakness, opportunities for improvement, and threats, areas we need to shore up. The outputs from that analysis really should go onto your risk registry so they can be addressed later. So we're talking about weaknesses there and opportunities for improvement. Action items to improve the IR plan, once again, kind of like weaknesses and opportunities. Strengths, of course, isn't going to end up anywhere on here, but it's a good pat on the back. We did a good job. And then some of the outcomes here should be like go into actual projects to make the word network more defendable. Notice I didn't say secure, I said defendable. You can't secure a network, but you can make the network more defendable. So, all right. So closing out, once again, every good prepper needs to have a good bug out, go bag, whatever Doomsday prepper needs. Let's talk about it. The physical bag. Listen, some of these things may not fit for your environment because of your maturity level, because of your resources or whatnot. But here's like a good, kind of list if you're dealing with incident response. Obviously, a large duffel bag or backpack is a must because how can you have a bag without a bag? USBs, tons of them, CDs, DVDs, external drives. Got to collect things, got to collect evidence, whatnot. This is especially useful, once again, if you have like a retainer. A lot of folks that you have a retainer with, Verizon, I think Mandy at one point in time had like these collection scripts that you can kind of run if you're not using like their fancy FireEye tools, which now they've separated probably isn't a thing anymore. But you got to put the evidence somewhere, and you can kind of throw this on these USBs and external hard drives. If you're going to get a USB for incident response, not notated here, but just kind of in general, the Kangaroo Blue USB drives cost a lot of money. They have a physical switch to turn them from read-write to just readable. This is especially useful if you are dealing with things that spread via USB, so like some old school USB worms. One of the reasons I've been harping on OT is because recently I've had to work in OT incident with Configure in an XP environment. So that goes to a lot of my comments that I've been making probably throughout this. It's kind of drilled into my head.
Oh god.
Being able to go and get like certain information that you need to kind of move around on these scripts, or like a notepad file or a text file with the steps that you need, like the OT technicians to take. Putting that on one of these Kangaroo drives, switching it over to where it's read only, helps prevent the spread of Configure until you can disable autoplay. If you're afraid someone's going to like flip that switch, like I said, they're only like $30 or $40. You can always put the stuff on there, flip the switch, and take a file and file it down so they can't flip it back. Live distros, we're talking like, Kali or whatever distro that you want. Most of the time we're talking about something with DD, so we can actually do like a disk image. If you want to do it across the network, you can do some fancy things with Netcat and DD. Yes, evidence collection tools. So CAPE is a big one. Kroll came out with it. Kroll Artifact Parser makes it really simple to collect like digital different types of artifacts. A lot of the kind of organizations that do, or a lot of your third-party providers are actually moving towards this, especially if they want you to do the collection. It costs money for a third-party provider to use CAPE, but you can use it free in your own network and then just give them the data that presents, and they can feed it into their own tools. Shameless plug. DFIR Art Collector is a super old thing that I wrote. It's a batch script. It uses pretty much the Windows sysinternal tools, WinPMem, FTK Imager to pretty much automate everything that you need and dump it in a forensically sound manner. Documents, hashes, the exact order, timestamps, everything was done so you can deconflict it. FTK Imager is also another evidence collection tool. A couple different ways to run it. You can run it live, which will give you a non-repeatable image. As I say, law enforcement don't really like that because you can't, recreate the image. Ideally, you shut it off, run it, and then do the dead disk collection. Ethernet cables, because you never have enough Ethernet cables. A network tap. Not talking like a Gigamon or anything like that. Some of the cheaper, easier taps.
Seriously, carry a Gigamon with you everywhere. You need a $10,000 repeater everywhere you go.
Hey man, if you've got the budget in the back to carry it, more power to you. Cell phone, of course, so you can be contacted. Flashlights, toolkits, notebooks and pens, because we talked about notes. Chargers for that cell phone, because you probably will need that. Also chargers for your laptops. Chargers of every type. Physical copies of your IR and disaster recovery business continuity plan is a good idea, because if you get ransomware and you only have a digital copy of your incident response plan, it doesn't do you much good, does it, if you can't read it? And then chain of custody forms. Ideally, we didn't touch on this. Chain of custody is kind of like an interesting hot topic in the community. Some people are like, if it's never going to go to court, I don't feel like I need to do like chain of custody, yada, yada, yada. I know the law enforcement people are kind of cringing. There is some validity to that, but it's better to do chain of custody and not need it than to not do it and need it. You never know how things are going to kind of like, twist and turn. No lies, there was a situation where I was aware of that someone went and took a SANS class with some malware and ran the malware on their corporate computer and infected the network, and chain of custody wasn't done. And then they were like, oh my gosh, we're going to let this person go. And then it created like a huge issue for them, because that person came back and knew just enough from their SANS classes about chain of custody. And did you do chain of custody? Can you prove it to me? How do you know you didn't manipulate any of the evidence? Listen, that's kind of like an extreme edge case, but listen, chain of custody still is like a good best practice, just to document what evidence you collected, what the file hash is, to make sure you accidentally didn't change something.
And chain of custody doesn't have to be super sophisticated, right? It can be fairly rudimentary, as long as you're gathering data points along the way, and you got the same data points all along the chain.
I will defer to the law enforcement folks on that, but yes,
Sure.
It does not necessarily have to be
also not a lawyer.
Yeah, it does not have to necessarily be super complex. I've got some forms I've used before. Some folks like to take pictures of things, so when they take a drive out and image it, they'll take a picture of it, get the serial number, all this other stuff, and include that with the form.
Would you?
And SANS has nice templates.
Would you say it's safe to say though that a shitty chain of custody is better than no chain of custody at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now it might cause you more headaches if you were to get into a legal situation if you had a shitty one.
Sure.
Once again,
could we have done better? Absolutely, but we did a thing.
Yeah.
We did a thing.
100%. Now let's talk about the organization's quote unquote bag. Listen, a SIM, syslog, or other centralized logging platform. We were just talking. Ideally, you don't want to go to a machine and pick up stuff, artifacts, logs off of it. This goes back to Locard's principle, which is the foundation of kind of forensic science. Pretty much, if you touch something, you modify it in some way. Essentially, Locard's principle, exchange principle, says if you touch something, you leave something behind and take something of it with you. So every interaction you have with a system changes it. The very fact, it's almost like quantum physics and the whole slit experiment. Is it a wave or is it a particle? The very fact of you interfacing with it changes it. It's just a matter of how much change, and doing so in a forensically sound manner that's going to preserve it and do the least amount of change. Centralized logging, if you get that set up beforehand, ideally, bada bing, bada boom, problem solved. Also, a lot of adversaries will wipe logs anymore these days. So if you have it centralized, it makes it a little harder to wipe logs out of the SIM unless they compromise the SIM. EDR, EPP. Not trying to sell things, but I will say that EDR and EPP is a godsend. There's a lot of stuff with dead disk forensics or even live forensics. Does give you a better viewpoint of what happened and went on. but you can't piece together that full story. If you have EDR and the EDR is properly configured, you literally can get down to everything that happened, really kind of spell out like possibly the adversary's intent. It is a phenomenal visibility. In fact, most providers, if you have EDR, they will rely heavily on the EDR and do dead disk forensics and just some like very light dead disk forensics to piece together some other stuff. And it greatly reduces the amount of hours, aka money, you have to spend if you're using a third party provider. So anything that gives that level of visibility and logging is a godsend. Full packet captures. Yes, stuff on the network's encrypted. It's not as useful as it once was, but it still has some usefulness to it. Flow data. Listen, full packet capture is kind of expensive. If you can't get full packet capture data, flow data or some type of summation, so Zeek data, extremely useful. I can't tell you how often like we've actually used like flow data to actually get like a higher confidence level on if data has been exfiltrated from the environment. If all I've got is a dead disk image, pretty much the only thing I can tell you is I can tell you, hey, like it's inconclusive because I don't see people staging data. If you have flow data, you can actually kind of speak intelligently. Like I don't see a massive amount of data. So if data was exfiltrated, it would only be a small amount. It really lets you speak intelligently about that. It also lets you uncover kind of like C2 C2 networks that you otherwise probably would have a hard time identifying. The last thing is, once again, building a defensible network. So that being said, all done. Thank you for your time. I guess I will now open it up to any other discussions before we kind of wrap it up and close it up because I know I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, Brandon, thanks for talking to us. I have a quick question about, I guess, the general concept of like rolling a plan out like this. Now, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of aspects, there's a ton of slides that says like this is how you set up this program. But if you're like a small organization or you're a less resourced and you don't have a guy that's like dedicated to doing a project where you're overhauling your IR or creating go bags or like a playbook or anything like that, what are some of like the cheap wins, both in resources, time and money that you could go after?
So the cheap wins is going back before the whole Doomsday Prepper stuff and actually just going to the generic prepper. And this really is just going to be getting management buy-in to make a program. Really, your incident response program is not going to be, I'm pretty much telling you to write something down and have a plan. And ideally, this is what it should be. But really and truly, if you're just getting started, your plan is going to be, we have cyber insurance. This is how we contact them. We have like a DFIR like retainer, either paid or not paid, with this provider or these providers. This is how you contact them. I've built relationships, so here's some other contacts and some other situations I need to reach out to. And I've reviewed the plan, maybe done a tabletop, and that is pretty much your incident response plan. Like, there's not much there. What you're doing is you're pretty much, going to bed every night saying a prayer that you don't get hit. And if you do get hit, you are kind of relying on that third-party provider and your insurance company to provide that coverage. Ideally, everything that we just talked about in the Doomsday Prepper, like all this data and stuff like that, because listen, this is not going to be something you're going to sit down and do in like a week or a month or a year. This is going to take some time. You can kind of break down a lot of this stuff and then slowly kind of develop that. And once again, because you've got that management buy-in, maybe you can talk about, getting a full-time person or dedicating, going from 10% of your time from doing this to 15 or 20% of your time. It's those easy kind of quick wins that you were saying are just going to be pretty much get insurance, get a provider, talk to that provider, see what they need whenever you do one, and just hope you don't have an incident at all. And then in the meantime, try to build out some of this capability. I'm not sure if that's, what you're looking for, the answer you want, but that would be my recommendation. I mean, if you're a small firm and, you're going to stay small, like you're just not going to build this capability. It's best just to outsource it. And like I said, do what you can with insurance and having a provider on a, budget's an issue, a no cost retainer. So essentially just everything's already kind of MSA is done. So, there is none of that procurement headache on either side when you have an incident. And then, you just rely on the insurance company to pay for a majority of that if you do get hit.
Okay, thank you.
Adam.
So you've got a insurance provider and a responder on retainer. So if you're looking for cheap wins, to piggyback on Mackenzie's point, wouldn't you want a contact list, right? Is that not the foundation of your whole process? Is who the hell do we call? Like, just pull up a list.
Correct.
And then
and that's kind of, maybe I should have called it out more. That's kind of more what this relationship is
Right.
building out those relationships with who you can call on and how to contact them if you do have an incident, in which case capacity that you would call them out in. Does that make sense? So this building relationships, like I said, I probably should have called it out a little bit more. The whole idea behind this is to actually build out that kind of soft contact list, or who to kind of like reach out to. I was about to say, in the insurance, let's see here, the cyber insurance provider, you see, yep, that last bullet point. Be sure to include the who, what, when, where, why, and how of contacting and utilizing your insurance provider. And it's the same thing here under the incident response.
Right.
So that's part of onboarding them, is adding them to that communication, figuring out how to communicate them, building those kind of like connections where you can't ask them to do things that's non-traditional, or who you can go to someone in an incident to have them perform some capacity or help you out.
Yeah. In my brain, the organic way of building this is start with the contact list and then build the triage process in front of that. Well, we only contact these people under these circumstances, these people in these circumstances, and build out from there. And then the process naturally flows from that, right? But
yeah, well, I would say a slight modification. Maybe we're on the same
Sure.
thing. I would say that the first step is to kind of build out the plan, which is essentially the communication thing. That's why it's in this order. But get insurance, because having a contact list of internal people without any kind of insurance does you no good. So we're going to start with insurance. And when you get that insurance, you're starting to build that contact list out right then and there with like the who, what, when, where, how, why. Then the same thing with the IR retainer, because like the insurance provider, this is why we say insurance first. The insurance provider will give you like an incident responder if you get into a situation. But the idea is you want to kind of find someone who maybe is like, and partner with that insurance provider that kind of fits your bill.
Does the insurance provider also give you an auditor?
No. So that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like the cyber insurance industry is very unprofitable right now because of ransomware, and they kind of created the problem because it was a cash cow. They're trying to build actuary tables and determine ways to provide insurance, and the industry hasn't matured as a whole for that. Big providers like AXA, they're working on this kind of stuff, and there are talks where part of like actually going and getting like cyber insurance will be kind of like getting like life insurance. If you're getting a policy over a certain amount for life insurance, you got to go and get a medical examination. Kind of the field of thought is until they can get actuary data and some of the data out there.
You have to demonstrate that you're doing a certain amount to maintain your own personal health, right?
Correct.
Like, whether that's an organization or you as a human being.
And they've tried to do that with some of the questionnaires they sent out, which is like, do you have antivirus? Check. Do you have a firewall? Check. Do you have an incident response plan? Check. And they're like, they've learned quickly that doesn't really work. So you're seeing some insurance providers now buying out cybersecurity consulting firms to actually do this type of stuff for them, or they are starting to now in the early parts of partnering with firms to do some of these assessments to give them feedback so they can kind of figure out how big of a risk you are and whether or not they should cover you.
In the long view. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so this is something that I foresee kind of like in the next 5 years becoming more of a thing. If you want to get cyber insurance, you're going to undergo like this certain type of assessment. Ideally, it will standardize across the whole insurance industry, but I don't see that happening for much longer. But I do see kind of like a lot of your insurance providers, if you are of a certain size, or you've got a certain amount of a certain policy number amount on them actually requiring you to go and have like an auditor or an assessor of some type to come out and do a security assessment.
Yeah,
it's on the horizon.
In the long view, it will get to a point where instead of having to survive a government audit of our security, we'll have to survive an insurance audit and make sure that we're doing all the things we're supposed to be doing.
Correct. And I think that you've got a lot of regulatory bodies and stuff like
Sure.
that might also throw weight behind that. So just like, for, life insurance, you can get group plans with discounts and whatnot. So I think that, this is me speculating. I have nothing to back this with. I think that, if you are, going back, because I did spend like a good bit of time working at Scanaway back in the day. I think that, if you are like, following NERC SIP and whatnot, they're kind of regionally broken up into bodies and whatnot. Maybe that body has something that they can go and they can offer you like a discounted cybersecurity, rate, and maybe it's very little auditing because they are responsible for ensuring that you meet NERC SIP compliance or certain standards, and the risk falls back on that governing body. So maybe it's like less touch, or you don't have as much of an audit. I can foresee stuff like that happening. Or even around PCI. Maybe PCI gives a little bit more stricter guidance on how to implement some of these controls. And now if you are like, pretty much like PCI certified, like by QSA or something like that, maybe now that you qualify for like, a cybersecurity policy without having to undergo an audit. I think that's the way things are going to morph. But once again, I think we're kind of far off from that, but I can definitely see that. But yes, going back to like your earlier point, yes, ideally organically, it's getting all that stuff, building out kind of like that original communication plan, and really it's all ordered in the way I think it should be done. Is then going through and then kind of building out like how we triage and kind of reevaluating like how we classify stuff, how we investigate stuff with playbooks, or if I don't have that capability, this is where I'm calling the IR provider. Once I've built that capability in house.
Yep.
Now I'm talking about how to declare an incident, who declares it, whatnot, going back to all that stuff with the RACI, communication guide, resources. So I've kind of tried to put this stuff in order, which I think is like a logical way of building a program out, with that basic stuff coming first, which really isn't building out a program. It's just like a CYA. And this Doomsday Prepper part really talks about actually building out a plan that is pragmatic, that you can actually follow. It's not going to be shelfware, high in the sky, pie in the sky, ivory tower kind of stuff you get from like Deloitte. Like, yeah, all works in theory, but in practicality, it works.
No, it makes sense to me. I mean, you got to start in phases, and you gotta have the basics first before you can go and start writing a plan.
Correct, and really and truly, that's any organization works like you're probably going to outsource it, and that's what we're essentially doing is outsourcing that capability in the early days to third party, and then we're trying to in-house and build out what makes sense. And some organizations, it's never going to make sense to build out all this capability. It's just going to be, it's cheaper, easier, makes more sense because of like the way our business is organized, to always rely on an IR retainer and kind of cyber insurance, and maybe the only thing we build out is that contact list and our ability to kind of do that triage, so we that triage pretty much can come down to whether or not you wipe the box and handle it in-house, or you actually contact your insurance company and kick off the whole scenario. Anything else? Questions, concerns, comments?
Oh, come on.
That was awesome.
Well, thank you.
Brandon, thank you so much. This has been absolutely outstanding. I have deeply enjoyed this personally, just because it's in my wheelhouse, but I think it's an excellent presentation.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be back after, I don't know, like a 2-year hiatus from presenting with you guys.
Yeah. And to bring you back sooner next time.
What are you doing in January?
We've already been scheming on the back end
Can
about
we shift you from a 2-year or an every 2-year transfer to every 2 months?
Every quarter. Every
Yeah,
quarter.
once a quarter you're
Once
gonna
a
present
quarter.
rules.
Yeah.
Brandon's quarterly corner.
I like it. That's a good. That's good. It's catchy.
It's catchy.
There you
You're
go.
doing
That's
it,
all you
baby.
need.
You have to do it.
It's just a jingle. That's all you need.
I tell you what, man, we go back to in-person meets and I get some free beer and you guys do like a little dog and pony show. And, you know, David, you put on skirt, you dance before my little, like, Brandon's corner.
I'll buy the skirt for David.
Yeah. Hula skirt. I mean, we can make it happen, man.
Do I have to buy my own skirt? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, you have plenty of masks. You need to buy a skirt to go
Oh,
along with the mask.
Adam, you know you got like 27,000 skirts in your closet.
Why do you have a mask within arm's reach?
David, you haven't been paying attention. I literally put on every mask I have in my Halloween box out in the garage.
Oh no, I had to full screen the thing for the presentation. So
yeah, no, I had this one.